welcome to this special Jamie-free edition of, what are we called? The One Fall Podcast. Brought to you in association with our new friends at Blueberry.
Good plug. I'll do the plug during the break. This isn't the designated time for the ad.
Right,
do it during the break, but I like your enthusiasm.
Okay, we don't like Blueberry that much that we're going to talk about them now, but I'm sure we'll talk about them if we get time. I'm your host for today, Dave. Just Dave. That's all you need to know about me, because I'm never doing this again. Joined by the African Swede sensation, Kurt Johansson.
Hello.
And from an ass man to a man who is an ass, the Pepsi Cola kid. Callum Machinist.
The Pepsi kid.
The Pepsi kid, Callum McInnes. And the man with the band, the Crimson Mask, James. He doesn't have a surname, unfortunately.
Hi there.
Hello.
Loving it.
Yeah, and we're going to...
me off. It's like it's a pilot or something.
It is, yeah.
Every week is a pilot, because we are always getting new listeners. We're up in the several hundreds now.
We've literally got hundreds of listeners.
We've literally got hundreds of listeners. So you could be one of the... Well, you are one of those hundreds because you're listening. But we are going to be talking about all things wrestling. Like NXT and all that malarkey. I know some stuff about that, so I'm going to be joining in. We've got our infamous pollcast. We've got 2 pollcasts.
2 for the price of 1?
2 for the price of 1.
2 for the price of none.
2 for the price of... Because this is a free...
They're usually free anyway,
podcast.
So.
Despite my attempts to monetize it, these guys seem to want to give all the good stuff away for free. World's worst hookers. And we'll be bringing you all of the news from around the world as we go along. But let's get started. Let's get started with the heat. After last week's fantastic suggestion that Starrcade could be the breakout WWE house show of the year, we now learn that WWE are bringing back another WCW franchise in the name of War Games. So what was War Games?
What wasn't War Games?
What wasn't War Games?
If Starrcade is the WrestleMania of the NWA and WCW, War Games is, well,
it's series.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, basically. For those of you who aren't familiar with War Games, back in the mid-80s through to, I believe it was 2000, they actually stopped for a few years in the middle of the 90s, unfortunately. Basically, War Games is 2 rings side by side with a giant cage that encompasses them both, basically like a Hell in a Cell. The idea is that you have 2, sometimes 3 opposing teams, each ticket intends to enter, and it's just a dirty, nasty brawl between everybody, and the first pin or submission is the winning team.
How can this go wrong?
How could it go wrong?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the match hasn't had a perfect track record, hence why they stopped it for several years in the 90s, unfortunately. If you speak to any of the NWA and early WCW fans, they will regale the early years as being the best. That was the years when it was, Ric Flair's team against Dusty Rhodes' team, and it was bloodbaths. It was the unbelievable, the debuts of Sting, the debuts of all of these other amazing stars. And then as you entered into the 90s, you started to get the trickle over from the fallout of the Neon 80s from WWF. You started to have Hogan, Savage, Luger, and then it started to go downhill, and I believe that was during the new generation. Nobody was tuning into either period, and I believe attendance was so bad that they decided, oh no, this is costing us way too much money. And then when Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff got their teeth into WCW during the height of the NWO, they brought it back and ravaged War for another few years until finally, mercilessly, the rabified dog was put to sleep
Old Yellow is taken
Old
out
Yellow.
back.
Oh, and Vince McMahon took great pleasure.
Putting that ball over his head.
Oh, yes. But that's not to say that War Games, as a unique, once a year possibly, maybe even less than that, event could really be a draw, especially for a house show. Although I can imagine it would make it quite a pain.
Well, it's not a house show this time around. It's for NXT Takeover in November.
That's true, yeah. Now it does make you wonder, how are they going to be able to? Because surely fitting in another ring, making space for that kind of thing, you're going to lose out on seating. So it depends on what venue it is. Whereabouts is NXT being held this time?
Is the
Takeover.
November show the Houston?
Yeah,
Houston,
yes,
right?
yeah.
So it should be a bigger space than most of the places that they normally do with like Full Sail and everything. So it's not like they're trying to cram 2 rings and a giant scaffold into Full Sail University.
But were all of the matches in War Games in the 2 rings?
No, it was just the main event.
So what do you do during the rest of the show with those 2 rings and the cage?
That's the thing. The cage stays suspended as with a Hell in a Cell or a regular cage, but it does create some unusual booking opportunities or mishaps. There's been some clever ring play throughout the years, especially in WCW, with people like Ric Flair taking advantage, playing mind games, being able to maneuver around, cause distractions because you can be moving between rings, like in World War III. Yeah. Similar things have happened, but that's an even bigger spectacle because it's 3 rings, which is just ludicrous by today's standards. Because of course WCW had to 3 rings, 3 cages, 60 men. Yeah. It's
any chance of getting War Games on the back of a moving truck?
Now that is something Russo has wet dreams about, I'm sure.
If Hulk Hogan and who was it he had that match with? He had that match where he was in a monster truck against Andre
the Giant. It wasn't Andre, it was the Giant.
Yeah, the Giant. So
yes.
if they can do a monster truck match, I'm sure they could put War Games on the back of a van.
On the back of monster trucks.
On the back of monster trucks.
that were sumo fighting at the roof of a building.
What do you think prompted for War Games? Because isn't that the reason why they created Elimination Chamber? There wasn't wanting to use War Games and wanted something.
That was Bischoff realising. What wasn't it? Him and Jericho working together on that one. I know it was predominantly Bischoff.
I don't want to say this, but I think they brought back War Games because of what is going on between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in North Korea. I think he's going to have the Korean wrestler versus the American wrestler.
There's no Koreans. The match is already announced.
Look, they all look. Any of them could be Korean.
What are you trying to say? Explain yourself.
So for our listeners, please ignore Dave with that comment. In the match, it is going to be the Undisputed Era, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole versus Sanity, so Wolf, Dane and Eric Young.
That's already interesting from the idea of it being in the 2 cages.
Exactly.
Though. Imagine when you were saying the mind games idea as well. Imagine the mind games Eric Young can play.
Oh God.
Oh well, it didn't stop there. There's Roderick Strong Team with Authors of Pain as well. So there's 3 teams, 3 members each.
Where do you put
rings.
Paul Ellering? Would he be in
Paul Ellering on a pole match?
On top of the cage.
They've got a shark cage.
They do. Dangle that.
I'm thinking on a forklift.
That's it.
Who else have we got for that? Are any more matches announced yet?
Isn't NXT Houston going to be the fatal 4-way for the women as well?
It certainly is with the recently vacated women's title.
I'm not sure on who's qualified so far. I don't really want to give away too many TV taping spoilers, but it was announced that Kairi Sane, the Mae Young Classic winner, is going to be one of the 4 members. So you've got War Games with 3 powerful teams, and you've got a fatal 4-way for the vacant NXT Women's title.
Imagine what Aleister Black and
the
Velveteen Dream. I nearly called him something completely different there. His actual name, obviously. Imagine what they could do within the confines of that.
Won't that be happening at Takeover as well?
I'm hoping so.
Yeah,
it's a perfect time
I'm sure that's happening at Takeover.
How about the Brits?
Who's McIntyre going to be facing? If Strong
is
Undisputed.
that's right.
Now weren't the suggestions that what's his name?
Dijak.
Donovan Dijak were going to be joining CFO. Could Could that
It's
throw
not
something
CFO, it's
into mix?
Undisputed Era.
Sorry,
The
Undisputed Era.
The CFO stands for Cole Fish O'Reilly.
We explained
Or-
this to him last week.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just assumed it was Chief Finance Officer,
Why?
and they were going to
Triple
bring in
H.
Triple H
I like that.
to lead them. But could that
Bring an era.
alter the shift of the Undisputed Era? Could we see
Yeah.
one of them take on?
It makes sense that Donovan Dijak does join the group,
Mhm.
especially because the thing about Fish, O'Reilly and Cole, they were all supposed to sign for WWE around the same time, but everything got delayed and put on hold because of the legalities between Ring of Honor and WWE.
Yeah, of course.
So Ring of Honor accused them of tapping up people like Cole Fish O'Reilly. So that got delayed, and Donovan Dijak was another person that got delayed.
Yeah.
So all four of them got hurt by the same complaints from Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's going to be the common goal.
Aren't all of these signings, War Games aside and how brilliant we've all decided it's going to be a side, aren't all of these signings just turning it into Ring of Honor?
I'm
But-
okay with that.
But that's what.
It's Ring of Honor with a sports entertainment
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
sugarcoating of it.
what Triple H and Heyman wanted to make ECW when they originally adapted it. Heyman knew that there was no way that they could make ECW work in the old 90s format that they had because it had already run its course, hence why it ran bankrupt.
Right.
He knew that the way to approach it was to basically create Ring of Honor, and now the fact that Triple H is being able to adapt their performance center into
And sign everybody under the sun.
that's it. You know, like the adaptation from OVW, FCW. Suddenly now you're able to put on house shows. You'll be able to give people a real platform with actual TV tapings and main events, all culminating in the possibility of being snatched up onto the main roster. Suddenly they've got their own power plant with TV cameras. Why? You know, like that seems like the logical thing, but now it does make you wonder what on earth will be the future going forward, because as much as McMahon and the Fed seem to have got this like the greater portion of sports entertainment, there are still other people that are trying to adapt and stand out and do different things, like Lucha Underground, AAA, you know, all the different companies over in Japan, and they're all still being able to coexist. They're all swapping talent, they're all being able to do these things, and it's almost as if we're seeing a resurgence of the territories again.
It's a great time to be a wrestling fan.
It is
for
an
that
incredible time to be a wrestling fan.
2017 is a surreal time
With
to be a fan.
with the ease of access now with the internet, of being able to do research, look into the history of all these different places, seeing how we've got to where we are now, being able to see all the stuff that's going on overseas, it's incredible. And that's the reason really primarily why we're able to do this podcast, is because of the ease of access of all these different talents and stuff. And it does make me think as well, because the main reason in the 80s why the Fed was so successful was Hulk Hogan, the hot commodity that was him. Vince saw exactly what was going to happen. He snatched him up. He said, right, okay, you're bending my arm with these agreements, with these, you know, percentages on merch takings and this big fat contract, but you're fucking worth it. Look what happened. Not only that, but McMahon was able to build a fucking incredible, like, mid-card using the top talents from all of the other different federations, all the different territories around America. But now the territories aren't spread around the US, they're spread around the world. And it's amazing things like the Mae Young Classic, like the Cruiserweight Classic, like the UK tournament, that are putting talent from all over the world in the eyes of Fed fans, who can then go, wow, that guy was awesome, I really liked him, and then they can look up online, find a Wikipedia page, find out where they're performing, see if, oh, you know, where else do they work, can I find some other matches? And the next thing you know, one stray showing on the network is leading somebody down this rabbit hole of all of this.
Well, look at, as you say that, like, look at the success ICW and especially Progress has got since the affiliation with WWE. Like, it wasn't going to improve them that much in the UK. I think, especially with Progress, their tickets sell out within 5 minutes of every show. But 3 times Progress have gone over to America and they've sold out their venues, and I think I touched upon it last week where it seemed there was more fans there to watch Progress than there was Evolve at WrestleMania weekend. So that's fantastic. So again, it's people in America crying out for the products and to signing up to the network, and whether that's happened because of the internet or for the WWE or because of the affiliation with WWE, like unsure, but
it's good for everybody involved.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
and it'd be doing a disservice if understanding the relationship between all of these underground and like up and coming different wrestling organisations when able to be pinned towards the WWE, sorry, because ultimately it all stems from everything that has been done decades before. You know, it's the reason why we had NWA and how prestigious that title was. Like the people that have held that belt, it's slowly morphing into WCW. You know, with Ted Turner being involved and helping to create opposition during the 80s and the 90s with WWF at the time, and it ultimately creating must-see TV. It helped to grab the steering wheel and just veer it straight into everybody's faces. You know, it was just incredible because suddenly wrestling opposition was at the forefront, and now that we are seeing, oh no, look, suddenly now that the bomb's dropped, now that the Fed taking over the world has dropped, we're starting to see the saplings of everything else starting to grow. Suddenly there is life elsewhere. You know,
I think it was growing, and that's what's prompted WWE to start going a bit more.
A bit of both, yeah. I think it started. There's some rumblings going around with like Progress and stuff, like you were saying.
But
it's the help from WWE.
They help Evolve as well, don't they?
Boosted it so much, yeah. And Evolve has always been a good promotion, but the affiliation with WWE has just brought it to the forefront. Like Donovan Dijak, he's an Evolve guy, Ring of Honor guy as well, and that's where I know him from. I've never heard of him before then, but like you were saying, it's good for everybody. And
yeah,
I think it's going back to the point. Is NXT basically going to be Ring of Honor? I hope so, because Ring of Honor is a fantastic product. And was you going to say something, Dave?
No.
Okay. I was going to chime in on.
It is a fantastic product. I think everything looks bigger and better in WWE, in my opinion. Like you can see, so like I've said it before with the Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens matches, we've seen enough of them in WWE. But when they got there, I was still wanting to see it, even though I've seen it a lot on the independents, because everything does look bigger. Hence why I want Angle and Joe, or Angle and Styles, or Joe and Styles happen.
You want to see the
WWE,
glitz. You want to see the glitz and the glamour of like the promo packages and the build up on screen and the promo cutting and
it's instantly like better in a way because of the production value that WWE have to offer.
Well, I mean, this does lean into something else that we wanted to discuss, which it was brought to our attention. A couple of tweets and a couple of different people have been debating on Twitter about whether or not wrestling should be considered and seen more as a sport or as sports entertainment. Like, where do you draw that line? And obviously, different companies have been kind of like shifting the goalposts, so to speak, in order to tell stories, kind of manipulate endings, create like memorable moments, invoke certain emotions and feelings towards different people, really being able to blur the line between, you know, sport or entertainment, but where can the line be drawn?
Let's just go over Rip's tweets, because he's made a few on this topic recently. His first one was...
This is what prompted us to want to speak about this topic as well.
Wrestling was much better when fans weren't busy dissecting matches, pushes, finishes, angles, and just enjoying the event like any sporting event. He then went on to say, the atmosphere at wrestling, especially the main, was just as real as a Lakers, Celtic, Yanks, Red Sox, Ohio State, Michigan game electric. Now it's ice capades or Harlem Globetrotters. Too bad. And to paraphrase Donald Trump, so sad. He then chipped in with, I would love to see the writers performing in the ring as wrestlers. That would be funny as hell. They would be so rotten without trying to be. Would probably outdraw current product. Couldn't be worse. The problem I have with that is Aaron Sorkin is an absolutely phenomenal writer. Probably a god-awful actor. Curtis Sutter's the same, apart from he can act. He doesn't want to be an actor in most cases. They're good writers. Other contributions he made was, fans today know wrestling ain't real, but I knew Rocky wasn't real in the theatre, but I still screamed for him as he made the comeback versus Apollo Creed. He seems to have an opinion that just drifts from left to right, like a giant bell end.
Oh.
Shout out to Jamie Bell.
Yes.
Bell, yeah.
Yes.
Was that because of his last name or that Isabella?
Hashtag
Don't-
Saved by the Bell.
Don't overanalyse the matches. You laugh, yell, scream, cheer, boo, flip 'em off, stick your tongue out, eat some junk, talk some shit, have the time of your life. Tomorrow it's back to the real world. Shit. The problem I have with that is I'm entitled to analyse a match, and there isn't a line that says I'm overanalyzing it in the same way that I can analyse any film I watch. For example, I watched Dirty Dancing for the first time this week.
Oh,
You
That
hated
film
that film.
is absolute tripe.
Agree to disagree.
I thought you'd have had the time of your life.
Oh! But I am entitled to that opinion, and the writer of it, who is quite a famous writer, I'm told, didn't get on my Twitter saying, how dare you say this shizzle about my bizzle.
Is that because he didn't see his tweet though?
She,
She.
a woman,
Oh,
wrote it.
sorry, I assumed.
Yes,
Don't
you.
assume.
Yes, you. What do they call it? Not mansplain. You gender assumed.
I did. That's worse.
Yeah. I'm going to check that it's a woman who wrote it now. So, is Rip right? Should we be treating wrestling as a sporting event? And if so, can I say I'm disgusted at how fixed wrestling is compared to sporting events if I'm treating it as a sporting event?
right. Well, there is an unusual dichotomy even within WWE, even with Vince McMahon himself. In fact, there is an officially released book of rules that you can buy that is by WWE. Okay.
Excellent. I like this
Yes.
already.
Yes, and it's I believe there's a foreword by Daniel Bryan. There's a couple of other wrestlers that are involved in it, and it's basically it's called the WWE Rulebook. You know, and how to break them. That kind of you know, it's got a very clever tagline. It's very recognisable as well. If you go to your local bookstore, you might actually be able to find it. It's quite hard to find physical copies, so you might have to order it online. But I stumbled across it in a comic book store in Manchester, so it just goes to show it can pop up in the most random of places. That actually came about because during, I believe it was during the Alliance angle, the invasion angle in 2001, Vince McMahon was he was trying to write out the ending to a match, and you know everyone was sat there in creative, and he was, oh, we should do this and we should do this, and then one of the writers said, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense because that just goes against the rules. And with that kicked off, oh, what do you know about the rules, goddammit? Show me this book of rules! Show me these rules that everyone's talking about! So the writer went away. The next day, he compiled an entire list, like a file of fact of all of the rules that have ever been pertained in wrestling.
Right.
Brought it to Vince McMahon. He looked it over and he went, that's garbage, and threw it in the bin.
Excellent.
So Vince McMahon himself understands that for the sake of storytelling, you have to bend rules. You have to, and if you go back and you watch old pay-per-views, if you go on the network, if you watch any kind of retrospectives or anything like that on YouTube, or just read up on some of the mad finishes that have happened in wrestling, you go, what happened again?
No, this is exactly the problem that I have. I have this with a lot of Star Trek fans in particular. They saw the J.J. Abrams film Star Trek. I forget which one, probably the one with the nonsense name. And there's a scene where Enterprise comes out of the water and goes into space, and they're all, oh, physics can't get around that. Oh, physics this, that, and the other. It's Star Trek. As long as the internal
There's
logic
nothing real.
applies, that's fine. I have the same thing with, if you're looking to treat wrestling as a sport, there's the scene where the heel comes down to the ring and he's giving the face some hassle in the ring, and the face comes storming forward and he's stopped at the ropes, and he's doing that thing where he grabs the ropes and he's pointing. If it wasn't entertainment, he would get out of the ring and go after the guy. The ropes aren't some type of impenetrable force field,
No.
but it's like the daft things backstage where you see them all standing looking at the screen at a most ridiculous angle, looking at the screen so that the camera can catch them. None of that, we all take the mick out of it, but it works because that's wrestling.
I think it depends on what sort of promotion and the nation it's based in. So New Japan is Japan in general is as if it's a sporting event. They'll do press conferences, and they'll treat it like that. The Wex will treat it like that, but as opposed to WWE and Impact Wrestling, Lucha Underground, it's a TV show.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
With its own internal logic.
Yeah.
So New Japan are treating it like a sport, but they're aware it's not.
Well, I mean, you can dice. You could go like backward and forward all over the world, and back as far as the 70s. When you think of World of Sport, the type of wrestling that was happening was so boring that they had to break it up into rounds like boxing. When you go over to New Japan, they have very specific weight divisions, and you have to make weight because
It's
that
just
is
very
part.
World of Sports round.
No,
That's part of
There's
the
been some great
storytelling.
matches in the rounds.
There was recently, and I forget which.
If you go back and watch Giant Haystacks versus Big Daddy and tell me that they've ever had a good match, I will slap your face.
Oh, there was a podcast recently where, and I forget which one it was, but they were talking about this. It may have been one with a couple of the legends, with a couple of the World of Sport legends, but they were talking about in a World of Sport show taping block or however it was done, they would say at some point, here's an exhibition match. The rest of it is a bit, like, well, we all know what the rest of it is like, but these are the guys who are doing it for real.
Yeah.
Well, that shatters the
Yes,
fourth wall.
It does.
No, I mean, because there was a stage when we all watched wrestling and we were all blown away by it because we thought it was real. And how we define real will vary from person to person. But I remember watching many, many years ago on the WWE network, because I'm not that old, early Undertaker matches. And even now, when you look at the Undertaker, for the duration of his match, he is the dead man.
He is undead. He is
Yeah.
unfeeling.
No.
Low blows don't hurt him.
Yeah.
He does the Jason Voorhees sit-up spot. It's
None of
fucking
us,
awesome.
None of us genuinely believe that he is a dead man. None of us genuinely believe he's from Death Valley.
No,
but
unless you were a fucking kid and you didn't know otherwise. You were a very young child.
And that's
yeah.
how it used to be. When we saw her in the ring, I remember because of somebody else close to me remembers because they're much older than I am. We'll say they're in their late 30s. They remember seeing what was his name? Lex Luger appear on the first Nitro.
Yes.
Was it the first Nitro?
It certainly was. Yeah.
God, you are
Genuinely
old,
didn't
Dave.
know what was happening.
You are old.
Yeah.
He said a friend.
Somebody else.
He never
Not
said
me.
it was him.
No,
we know
100%.
None of us
Yeah.
knew what was happening.
Yeah, because you could flick between the two channels and you could see Lex Luger was having a match on
It's
Raw
like-
in the ring at the same time as making a walkout
How
appearance.
cool is that?
That is unreal. But that was the wall shattering. That was
Yes.
the first.
the Scott Hall stuff
That,
as well.
that was the first shot fired by WCW. Look, Raw is pre-taped.
Yeah, look at that, and to us, I mean, when the
and then they
when,
started giving the results out.
well, yeah,
Exactly.
When Hall and Nash debuted and they did that whole
Everyone legit thought
"Here,
it was an
Chico,
invasion.
we didn't know you know who we are. We ain't gonna say who we are, homie," which is probably a word he said. Don't go back and watch
You
it.
know who we are, but you don't
Yeah.
know why we're here.
Yes.
Yeah, and we were like, oh, it's Diesel and Razor
yeah.
Ramon. We didn't know any different.
No.
And what Rip Rogers seems to be getting at is that it should be treated as a sport. Why should it be treated as a sport when, for as long as I can remember, it has just been entertainment?
For me, the like as much as I like the in-ring aspect of it all, and I don't want to say it may not be as sport as in terms of boxing, UFC, but they are still athletes. There's no disputing that. each and every one of the wrestlers are athletes.
You're
but
never watching it thinking,
I prefer-
oh, that stunt was done by a stunt double. They put, like it's
Yeah.
those guys doing those
Yeah.
things.
But it's for me, it's the TV aspect that people should be looking at. It is the entertainment, and like I think some fans get a bit too carried away with things that maybe blur the lines a little bit or in too politically correct.
Absolutely, things like there were fans who, when Tyler Bate and Trent Seven appeared in WWE's UK tournament, and they were both on the side of good, they were like, oh, does that mean they're going to be good guys everywhere? How will we tell the difference? You'll tell the difference in the same way that I know that George Clooney in ER isn't playing the same part as George Clooney in Batman.
Just one thing as well, to add to that point. When Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne had that match in, was it Attack Pro?
Oh, yes.
Where they swapped
Oh,
gimmicks.
yes.
Tyler came out as Pete, Pete
Yes.
came out as Tyler.
Amazing.
It's not like they actually swapped identities.
And it wasn't like fucking Freaky Friday.
Yeah.
He fucking woke up like, oh, I'm in this body now. What the fuck?
Yeah. It's like I see it all the time with people. So, for example, Joe Hendry, people are like, well, he's a face in said promotion, say WCP. I know he's a heel now, but at the time, he's a face in WCPW, but he's a heel in ICW or vice versa. And it's like, I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense. Like, how can Pete not be friends with Tyler and Trent in WWE, but the friends on the independent? It's
a
story.
show.
Yeah.
It's entertainment.
Yeah.
It's a story.
For example, so Nathan Cruz responded to our question of whether it should be treated as a sport.
Can we just wait 5 seconds for him to steal the show?
Go on then.
5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Steal the show.
Jesus Christ. So, Nathan's response was, it's neither. It's a physical theatre, which is a show you spectate, applaud, appreciate, and invest in characters.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's without the negative connotation of it, because unfortunately for most people they don't go to the theatre at any time but Christmas. No, I'm saying most people. That's a terrible but accurate generalisation. It isn't pantomime, it's theatre. It's closer to theatre than it is to sport.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
that brings me on to the second one. So, Matt Myers tweeted, I always say we have more in common with EastEnders than boxing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, if you think about it, it is.
Yeah.
In the aspect of WWE and the sports entertainment side of professional wrestling, is spot on.
One of my favourite, and you can find it on YouTube and on the WWE Network. One of my favourite one of my favourite video things that Vince McMahon ever did was explaining that we are beyond insulting the fans with the idea of good guys versus bad guys. The promo is called "Cure for the Common Show," and I believe it was just after Bret had left the company. Bret Hart, you probably don't remember this, but Bret Hart left WWF under a cloud, and he barely ever mentions it, I must admit. Very humble. He got back and friendly with them now that they own his whole video catalogue. But I'm sure that's not the reason. And he was basically saying that we are beyond the idea of good guys versus bad guys, of this idea of black and white, like good and bad.
It's that promo that led to the Ruthless Aggression era.
Yes,
And
absolutely,
it's that
yes.
promo that helped to establish Mr. McMahon as a screen character.
Yes, because again, and this goes back
The
to
best
my
thing to
friend
ever happen in wrestling.
Yes.
but the best, my friend who is much older than me, he remembers the day when Vince was on commentary.
Yes.
Again,
And
he
none
was a
of us sat there
commentator.
thinking, oh well, why is Vince McMahon, the guy who owns the company, on commentary? That's like Ronald McDonald serving fries at Burger King.
Well, that's because nobody knew at the time.
Exactly.
Because he had there was an on-screen. Oh God, for the life of me, I can't remember who they're on screen. Jack Tunney.
Yes,
It
President
was-
Jack
it-
Tunney.
President
We
Jack
genuinely
Tunney.
thought President Jack
Yeah.
Tunney was in charge, and you don't get in. You're not going to get Sepp Blatter. Is he a thing? Sepp Blatter? Any football fans here?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, you're not going to get Sepp Blatter, who was the man in charge of FIFA,
Yeah,
FIFA.
it was just corrupt
Yeah.
as the phone.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
turning up to one of the football shows as referee.
No, he
But
can't be
Vince
trusted. He's
McMahon
corrupted.
did. It
Yeah.
did turn up as.
But
and it's
would he do
phenomenal.
commentary?
Well, I would hope
Yeah.
so, and I would hope he would be as good
Well,
as Vince.
you can get both sides of the coin because you could say that adding a sports element gives you opportunities to tell a story.
Yes, yeah.
For example, the Royal Rumble, there is allotted times for people to come into the ring. There are rules that are abided by, and because of that, you have a framework where you can tell an interesting story, including 30, possibly more participants over the course of an hour. It happens once a year, and it is by far my favourite event of the year, every single time, because the Royal Rumble is everything that you could embody in the art, the storytelling, and the entertainment of wrestling in one night.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic.
If we look at sport, and to go back to one of the previous comments we had, if we compare wrestling to boxing, if you watch a good wrestling match, you see a story told in that match, and you see a complex story told without words quite often in that match. If we compare it to boxing, a story is never told in the boxing ring. It's two guys who are trying to stop the other guy so that they win the money, which sounds great in a film, but you wouldn't go watch a film where that was just the plot. You would want other things thrown in there to make it exciting.
I was going to bring this up, Dave. To flip the coin again, imagine UFC, right? They used to be very by the book. It's just fighting. It's just two guys going at it. No character or anything. But now you've got your Conor McGregor, who is a character. He is a gimmick, whether you like it or not.
So is Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, even Floyd Mayweather is a gimmick.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the fight, they'll shake hands, and everything that came before that was just a promo.
Yeah, it's all undone, and then they can all have a laugh in the fucking locker rooms afterwards.
Yeah.
Because they've
Look
just
how much money we've
look.
made.
Yeah, that's it. Look at all of our bank balances. Let's open up a bottle of bubbly.
So if you imagine this is a real sport opposed to wrestling being predetermined, but they're using the character aspect of WWE and professional wrestling.
Yeah.
McGregor walks
The
like
whole
Vince
point
McMahon, for
is
God's sake.
UFC now, not sports entertainment too.
Well,
Yes.
did they come out at UFC? Did they come out to
Music.
Yes.
music?
The
Boxing,
entrances.
Yes.
boxing. It started with wrestling. It got into boxing, and the idea of because at the end of the day, it is just a walk. I bet they come out to wrestling to music in darts now.
Yeah, they do.
Because
I'm sure they do.
Because that builds the audience.
Yes.
It gives that. They might as well be be coming down to the ring, not the darts players, because this would be a stupid chant for them, going, watchers, fighting, clap, clap, clap. I could just clap because I'm on audio. Clap, 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 clap. Watchers, fighting. But no, they come down to simply the best if you happen to be Chris Eubank or other boxing themes for other boxers. Just look at Rocky.
But what you're saying is, look how wrestling has inspired these legitimate
Yes,
sports.
absolutely. To make them more entertaining.
Yes.
Well,
Look at
you
that.
have soccer players and American football players. Well, football for us in the UK, it's football, and then American football. You have
That's like saying English and American English.
you.
There's one word that is always correct in there.
Well, you have people like when they're celebrating, they'll copy WWE guys, and like Nova Sport transcends anything else, and it is because it's the entertainment.
Like when the Yes chant went viral, Fandango's theme went viral.
Yeah.
These are all things from wrestling, but went mainstream in legitimate sports.
Yeah, the RKO out of nowhere becomes a popular thing.
There's a reason so many wrestlers become actors and not American footballers, tennis players, box.
Yeah.
Because
And you never see. Well, I don't imagine there have been many wrestlers who have gone, you know what, I'm going to give this up and become an American football player. It's usually the other way around.
Lesnar.
Oh, Lesnar.
Yeah, but usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
He did stuff like that though, didn't he? At first, but then he was wanting to. That failed. He went to Japan. Then he ended up in UFC.
Yep.
And then back to WWE.
Yeah.
And then probably back to UFC.
Yep.
So, after we demolished.
Well,
Rick
one
Rogers,
more
demolition
point.
of the Rick.
Wrestling is sport. The brawl for all. That's what happens when wrestling tries to take itself seriously as a sport. Admittedly, it's wrestling trying to be boxing.
Actually, that wasn't the reason being. So the reason behind the brawl for all was JBL thought he was the dog's bollocks behind and in the backstage, and he was like, I'd be able to knock most people out. So Vince Russo was like, I'd actually like to see that happen.
Yep.
Put it to Vince, why don't we do a segment called Brawl for All, where it's a legit boxing match to see who's the hardest in the locker room for the guys that weren't doing too much, and hence why main event guys or guys.
And this is a new generation mid card as well. Yeah. This isn't the cream of the crop from all of the territories. This is after they've either retired or gone to WCW. So this is basically, as far as people are concerned, nobody's. They're not main eventers. They're not holding titles.
I don't think it would be nobody's because you still had.
Well, no, there was still people through affiliation. So you had Blackjack Bradshaw, because it wasn't JBL at the time.
Yeah, it was Bradshaw, but
you had Bart Gunn, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Draws, all of these other people that were decent in-ring competitors.
It was a different era though because of the internet. If somebody's a mid card, they're essentially shit. So, for example, if somebody leaves WWE,
well, there's a sound bite that we can remove from this.
No, so if somebody leaves WWE and goes to Impact Wrestling. In WWE, there was a mid-carder. Yeah. Impact pushes him as one of their main guys. Like, he's crap, he's shit, he shouldn't be. Like, he was nothing in WWE. It's a different TV show.
Yeah.
And to prove that, look at Ethan Carter III. He's one of the best things. Like, his character is spot on. Eli Drake, their current champion, again, didn't make it in one place. But so I think back then, what I was getting at is the mid-card. If you watch Attitude Era stuff, the mid-cards were actually very popular guys when you think back of your memory. People like Val Venus.
Some of my favourite wrestlers at the time were the mid-card, and it wasn't because they were title holders, it was because they were having entertaining story arcs. Val Venus, Test, Albert, Funaki and Kai and Tai, Crash Holly, Hardcore Holly, D'Lo Brown, all of these people.
I think that's where Russo needs his credit. Because he made sure everybody had a storyline. He made sure everybody stuck true to the character because he wasn't a booker. He was a TV writer.
Yeah,
and that's why. And I think so with the Brawl for All, that's why they did it to see who would be the hardest man. And obviously we know Bradshaw, JBL didn't back his money up and. Bart Gunn went on to
originally
everybody out.
Originally, everybody thought that Dr. Death Steve Williams was going to be the one to win. It was designed as well to push him into the main event and to take the position of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then look what happened. He got knocked out by Bart Gunn. And then there was an incident backstage or something kind of political happening when it all came out. And I believe that the Brawl for All ended around Survivor Series. Then they had the main event, which was Bart Gunn against Butterbean at WrestleMania.
Dear Lord.
Bart Gunn got knocked out in 90 seconds. I believe it was even less than that. It might have been within 60 seconds. Completely undid all of the work, all of the hard man status that it had created because they put a wrestler who was, in great shape. He was a great physical athlete, but he wasn't a boxer. And he got his jaw rocked by Butterbean, who is a professional super heavyweight.
Yeah.
There is a clear line. That's what happens when you go far past the line. Sometimes to the detriment of people, but then you can have sports elements. You have rules. You have referees. You have, back in the 90s and the 80s and further back, there were time limits for matches, and it would go to and that's another thing as well. You have to. I feel like you need to embrace certain aspects of sport to make wins and losses feel like something. The G1.
Yeah.
It's all wins and loss based. It's all points. It's a tournament.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But again, it goes back to the idea of internal logic. As long as it makes sense in and of itself, it's absolutely fine.
Yes.
Let's take our next topic.
Yeah.
Is that may say
BW News, so British
BW News. We're going to talk about BW.
Yeah, so just some of the things that have happened in British wrestling this week. So to start off with, shall we talk about Zack Knight and Bubblegum and their injuries? And
you take the reins, Kerr. Let's have a discussion.
Okay, so Zack Knight could be suffering with a potential career-ending injury. doctors are still trying to find out what's wrong with him. I know it's something to do with his stomach. That isn't great. He's got like back, shoulder, and neck problems as well. But it's this stomach injury that could end his career. So with guys like Zack Knight and Bubblegum, this is their living. They're full-time wrestlers. That's how they pay the bills. That's how they look after the children. So WAW are presenting a Zack Knight fundraiser at Epic Studios in Norwich on October the 14th. All proceeds will go to Zack Knight. Adults £10 a ticket, children £5 a ticket. So if anybody's in the area for that, then please get yourself down to that. Also, Harvey Dale, he set up a Just Giving account to help Zack Knight and Bubblegum. He's aimed to raise £500. I think they've surpassed that. They're now at 550.
540.
Oh,
Off quite a fair few supporters there. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. This isn't the first time Harvey has done this type of thing to support people. He was one of the many supporters of Chris Travis when he passed away, raising a lot of money for that cause. Bubblegum is possibly one of the best shorter guys in British wrestling who just genuinely looks like a legitimate hard man.
So underrated. It's frustrating that he's not got that break, and he's slightly been getting that with Rev Pro, and he's got some big matches announced. So hopefully,
I'd love to see Bubblegum in Japan.
Well, with Rev Pro, it's at Global Wars. So his first match that got announced was Bubblegum vs Rocky Romero. So hopefully he's going to be better by that comes round. Cause obviously, Will Ospreay versus Okada that happened at Global Wars, that's what got Will Ospreay in the door at New Japan.
So fingers crossed, this could be Bubblegum's big break.
Yeah, so regarding Bubblegum's injury, he's been struggling with his back, and he's been posting things on social media about being in a lot of pain and losing the feeling in his legs where he can't move his legs and having to go to hospital. So it's been recommended that he'd be out for like 3 to 4 weeks. Round the house, he has to be on his crutches. To go out the house, he has to go in a wheelchair.
And this is a guy who is in, to look at him, is in peak physical shape.
He's one of, if not the best conditioned wrestler in the UK.
I can't think of anyone with a better physique than Bubblegum. It's insane.
Exactly.
When you think about what he used to look like when he first started wrestling, he was a scrawny guy. He was great in the ring, but he didn't look anything like he does now.
No.
His transformation is one of the best you'll see in British wrestling.
I think the only people that could potentially be better in like the physique, like Justin Sysom or Yeston Rees, but
he adopted Finn Balor's diet program, and we've all seen what Finn Balor looks like. Yeah, and I mean, Bubblegum is also one of the nicest guys you could possibly meet. He's got a young family. He's got three boys as well, who he absolutely adores for good reason. He's just an absolutely fantastic guy to be around.
And with all these injuries, because I think they've been niggling for quite a while, and it was for a lot of these guys. And I remember because one of the standout quotes from John Cena is that there's a difference between being injured and hurt. You can work hurt. Yep.
And you just think that these guys, especially on the independent scene, if they're not working, they don't get statutory sick pay. They don't get an employer who's going to be like, yeah, just take time off, recover, come back when you're ready, we'll cover your work for you. There's no union, there's no work for them, they don't get paid.
Yeah. So I think his injury could be to do with like sciatica. Like I said, like paralysis in his lower body down one side. So hopefully that'll surpass. And to be fair, there is some companies and people like Harvey Dale out there that will try and support the British wrestling guys that are getting hurt. So again, Bubblegum's got three children. That wrestling's his only income. He's doing it full time. So if you can go to the Just Giving account, even though it's past 500, they're still taking donations for
What's
people.
the address for that?
I'll let you find that one as
I've just donated to it. So while we were talking, because I had meant to do that. It is www.justgiving.com. www.justgiving.com/. Lord, this is one hell of a...
Right, for our listeners,
No,
go to our social media.
everybody,
We'll
everybody
post
wait for me now.
it.
That's how it's going to work. Everybody...
You really say backward slash instead
Yes.
of backslash.
Backward slash. That's because it is. It is justgiving.com/crowdfunding/support for Zach and Pip. Zach spelled Z-A-K. And we wish them well from the One Fall Podcast boys.
Yeah. We'll post a link for Just Giving on our
Twitter
page and our Facebook page.
and Instagram. We'll get our graphic designer to graphic design it.
At
Yes.
One Fall Pod.
At
Yeah.
One Fall Pod.
So please support that. For any of you that are near Liverpool, TNT, a promotion that Bubblegum works for, they've arranged an evening with Bubblegum. So here's some good stories. Somebody like Bubblegum, who's very seasoned, he's going to be out there. Like, he's going to have some great stories. So yeah, TNT, evening with Bubblegum on 16th of October at Motel in Liverpool. £10. That includes a free picture and signed 8x10. So even if he wasn't injured, it'd still be worth going down. But the fact that he's injured and this is his income, please get yourself down there if you're in the Liverpool area.
And on that note, I think we will take a quick break. And we will be back with you shortly.
See you soon.
Bye for now.
Anyway, welcome back to the One Fall Podcast, where we will be bringing you that's right, two of our infamous podcasts. We are four guys with two poles, and we will be sliding up and down them like there's no tomorrow. The first one is, and the question for the first one was, what's your favourite pop?
In recent history.
Now, my favourite pop is, and always will be, Ribena. Now, I am actually partial to Vimto and Dr. Pepper, and thankfully, thanks to a delicatessen that I think is called Madison's down Newland Avenue in Kingston upon Hull, the city of culture, you can still get cans of Rio, which is like a watery, fruity drink, which is absolutely wonderful.
Right.
The fans, for some reason, misunderstood the question and gave us the following results to their favourite pops in history.
So, over to Callum. Callum will explain
Yes,
what
Callum.
pop we actually meant.
So,
We didn't mean drinks.
yeah, as Dave said, the fans misinterpreted and gave us wrestlers. And from the least votes to the most votes, we've got the debut of Shinsuke Nakamura.
I was confused. Was this NXT or SmackDown?
The debut NXT.
Okay.
So, that was a big pop.
That's my Shinsuke Nakamura theme tune there for you all.
Thanks, Dave. Do you want to
Beautiful.
do one for every
I will.
Okay,
Yes.
so we've got
Please
Shinsuke
do it.
Nakamura with 8%. We've got the Seth Rollins cash-in.
Does Seth Rollins have a theme?
Yes.
Keep Rollins, Rollins, Rollins. Keep Rollins, Rollins, Rollins.
I think
Keep
I prefer that
Rollins,
one.
Rollins, Rollins.
With 13%.
All right.
I just
okay.
want to know what Dave's had before this podcast.
Yeah.
AJ Styles
Get ready to fly.
I am.
debuting at the Royal Rumble with 21%. And the return of the Hardy Boys.
Their theme goes. I actually don't know what their theme goes like. Oh no, that's isn't it something to do with something they say? We'll say it's. You know you'll be learning shit right here, L-I-M-B.
That's the
Biscuit is
same
right
song.
here. All right, well that's the song for everyone now.
That was the Undertaker's Lost Prequels entrance on the motorbike.
Oh,
So the Hardy Boys returning at WrestleMania 33 with 58%.
can't have been that memorable. I don't even know what their theme is. How do these wrestling fans like 58% of
Right,
the Hardy Boys?
So this was aimed at within the past 18 months to 2 years for Fave Pops, because I mean, if we were talking about pops across all of wrestling, so many.
Even making the list of the 4 from recent history was hard enough.
Yeah.
Like,
You missed out Shane McMahon's return.
I meant to put Shinsuke above that.
The biggest pop
Really?
that I can think of in the
Sorry,
past
Dave,
15 years.
Kurt's a Shinsuke hater. We know this.
Oh.
I'm not a Shinsuke hater.
So-
Why do you hate Shinsuke Nakamura?
I don't. I just think it's been poorly written.
Carry on,
It's been on
Dave.
SmackDown.
Kurt's made his point.
The biggest pop, as we all agree, in the history of WWE in this case, / WWF / whatever they were called before that, his name escapes me, probably wasn't important, was that moment where the catatonic Linda McMahon stood up out of her wheelchair and showed that she was the main McMahon.
And the crowd went ballistic.
They went ballistic.
did.
They were so shocked you could hear a pin drop in the arena and some snores, but mainly the pin dropping in the arena.
Did we watch a different thing?
No, they went ballistic because,
They really
because
did.
Linda McMahon is, as I've said, the one true McMahon. Or McMahon, as some people pronounce it. I've
Or
noticed.
if you're doing it authentically Scottish, it's
Yeah.
McMahon.
Oh, McMahon.
Yes.
Oh no, that's the Irish accent.
It
that
really is.
I
Right.
sound like me Finn Balor there.
I find it quite unusual, but I understand because there's limitations in the poll. Shane McMahon, when I look back,
Are you very limited with your poll?
I'm never limited with my
Can
poll.
we keep this PG?
When I think of the
Dave,
biggest
we're not
pops in wrestling to do with the Fed, especially, a lot of them are Shane McMahon. Ironically,
Are you a Shane McMark? See what I
Um,
did there?
I agree. Shane McMahon should have been on that.
he's
Oh,
been
you didn't get
responsible.
to say
He
so.
has been responsible for some of the most awe-stricken moments in recent and years gone by. We think the merger when McMahon did the simulcast in Panama
Oh,
Beach.
Yes.
Shane McMahon came out live on WCW and he says the contract doesn't read Vince McMahon, it reads Shane McMahon. Awestruck Vince McMahon, and you've got a smug face Shane on the Titantron.
Could you imagine if that
Amazing
was
pop.
actually real? Like some fans think like wrestling should be, and it's all a sport and whatever. Could you imagine if that was real and he's undercut his old man and he's like,
Yeah.
"Yo, Dad, fuck you."
Yeah. That'd be fucked up.
Absolutely amazing pop. When the numerous times he's done giant falls from the Titantron. His match against Steve Blackman, his match against Kurt Angle at King of the Ring when he got put through the pane glass in the entrance. His jump from the Hell in a Cell. His return.
Which should have been on there.
Recent memory.
Okay, if you want to do your own podcast,
I did the
then
second.
Feel
Is
free.
is it possible? Because were we expecting the Hardy Boys to come back?
I was.
I
'cause
was.
I was there, and I saw them an hour before get taken away to the
But-
arena in a car. So
But did everybody see that? What I mean, because
To be fair,
quite
all
often at these
four,
events
all
you hear chants
Yeah.
of "Oh, we want
yeah,
Hardy
all
Boys."
four of those. No, I get what he means. Like all four of those
No,
were
I don't-
kind of expected. We knew Shinsuke was ended up in WWE. We had a feeling Seth Rollins may or may not cash in. Styles, those rumblings whether or not he's going to debut in the Rumble, and the Hardys, we kind of knew those.
Yeah, the
heading
contract to come up.
But
they were in
Shane
talks.
McMahon return was one that nobody
I'm not
expected
going to say it wasn't a
whatsoever.
big pop.
So-
I
It
think
got
Shane
more of a
deserves
pop
his
than-
own. Shane deserves his own poll. for
Yeah, which
one
is the
he
best
thinks
pop.
the best Shane McMahon moment.
Yeah.
So to not dilute that one, I put in Shinsuke because that's one of my personal favourites. I know you won't agree, Kurt, because you're a Shinsuke hater. We've
Yeah,
discussed this.
I am not a Shinsuke
The
hater.
African Swede sensation, Shinsuke hater, whatever. We've gone over that, but that's why I put it on. It's one of my favourite pops. A little bit biased, I've made the podcast, so.
It's all right. That's all good. But can you think of any other memorable pops in the past few years that have happened that could have made the list?
Shane McMahon return.
Yes, that didn't include Shane McMahon. Come on now,
Um,
behave yourself.
Maybe Bobby Roode debuting on SmackDown. He's glorious, gets a great
I
reaction.
don't think that would have beaten Shinsuke debuting.
I would say.
Yeah,
I'd
no.
say AJ, the Popster in the AJ Cena match.
The crowd reaction to Tyler Bate versus Pete Dunne at
Yeah.
Takeover.
Yes.
The fact that they completely stole that
Ooh,
audience's
they did,
heart with
yes.
their performance.
Yes.
Shall we move on to our second poll?
What? There's a second one?
There is the second of our two polls. This one
Was
what the
my
question
poll.
Oh, well, let's all admire Kurt's poll.
So, it was, if you could choose one female wrestler from history to have one more match, who would it be? The first one was Shane McMahon, because it's...
Yeah, obviously, yes. I mean, obviously with Kurt, the thing you have to bear in mind with Kurt is that he's all about the ladies. And if you want to get in touch with him at Kurt Johansson 93, I'm sure he'll tell you more about it.
Okay,
Slide into those DMs like he'll slide into your bedsheets.
And... Oh.
Amazing.
Okay, so... This one's a little bit heartbreaking, to be honest.
Okay, yes,
So,
yes it was.
The
Yes.
first one is Alundra Blaze.
Did you vote for
Can you
her?
just go through the names for me?
And then we'll do
I'm
names, then
gonna
percentages.
make a point
Okay,
about this
yeah.
because I think the point is
Alundra
important to
Blaze.
make. Okay, Alundra Blaze, yeah.
Beth Phoenix.
Okay, yeah.
Trish Stratus.
Mhm.
And Lita.
Now let me ask, what did the voting public, the same voting public that gave The Only Way Is Essex a BAFTA, what did they choose as their lowest entry of that list of Hall of Famers?
They chose Alundra Blaze.
With 7% out of 121 votes.
Now I'm going to assume that these listeners, of which we now have hundreds, and you might all want to take a moment to think about this yourselves, haven't seen the fantastic Trailblazer documentary. That is the only bad thing about it is it is woefully short on the WWE Network. To see what impact Alundra Blaze had on not only women's wrestling in the 90s, 90s, go back, watch the stuff, it's all on the WWE Network, and the impact she had on redefining women's wrestling when she dropped the belt into a garbage can.
Which she didn't want to do.
She didn't want to do, but as
At
she
the end of
does
the day,
say,
she had bills.
it's the bills to pay, yes. Who was the next highest on that list?
Well, it was joint highest with
Joint highest. Okay. Who
Yeah.
were the two joint highest?
Oh no. So next on the list was
Mhm.
Beth Phoenix and Trish Stratus both got 26%.
I agree. Both of those absolutely fantastic talents. Beth Phoenix looked like a monster in the ring. Now, compared to some of the women, she isn't that large, but
Beth
she
Phoenix
had
let Charlotte in.
presence about her.
Yeah.
She had poise. She had grace. And Trish Stratus, I will admit that Trish Stratus is one of the best talkers. If you've ever heard her in an interview, she talks so quickly but so insightfully. She also had some of the best. Not only the best matches, but also the best silly moments. Who can forget Triple H trying to help Trish Stratus, with various exercises,
And
only
Steph
to have
walks in.
Steph walk in, and it was such an hello moment. You could have had Triple
I
H
can't
there
remember.
going, "You stupid woman! I am just helping her, helping
hell's that
her
accent?
with
Hello,
her."
hello.
It's a French accent, obviously, channeled through hello. And that was the beauty of that. Who did they pick as number one?
They chose Lita with 40%.
Not even the Mamacita. They chose Lita. Was she a Mamacita? I always thought that was China. Why is
That was
China
China,
on the
but
list?
yeah, because sadly she's passed away.
Essa Rios.
Oh yes,
So
that's
China-
actually quite true. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
no,
why. That's why
it-
China isn't on the list.
It was China who was the Mamacita because
Yes.
she had a thing with Eddie Guerrero
Oh.
on
You're
screen.
thinking
Mamacita.
Essa Rios.
Essa Rios was the person to bring Lita into the
Oh.
Fed.
And Lita, again,
Yes.
absolutely fantastic. Her allegiance with the Hardy Boys was phenomenal.
So I'm intrigued, Dave. So since you really wanted Alundra Blaze to be
Yes.
higher, if she was to return for one more match at WrestleMania, who does she face?
Oh, now I do have a dream match for this one, weirdly enough, because my outstanding memory of Alundra Blaze is the same thing that Scott Hall describes as a curtain sellout in the Fantastic Trailblazer documentary, which is available on the WWE. Her program in the 90s with Bull Nakano, because she was a
Bull
monster.
Nakano.
Now, Bull Nakano probably isn't available to the WWE. However, somebody who is and was recently on WWE Network, Awesome Kong.
Yeah.
Awesome Kong versus Alundra Blaze. Fairly
Karma.
that.
Was it
Yes,
Karma?
Karma.
But
Yes.
technically that's cheating because that's 2 returns for 1 match.
Yes.
So who's on the current WWE roster? Who would Alundra Blaze face?
Who could
I-
Alundra Blaze face? Now I would
Asuka.
obviously have to go to the women's locker room and ask her. But that's who it can be. Asuka.
No, you're wrong. That would be a great match, but I think Blaze against Charlotte Flair.
Oh
They are
yes.
both about the same build,
Yes.
the same height.
Yes.
I think it would be an
The same
interesting clash of
belief.
styles.
And I
Seeing
think
Yes.
that's
in
I
ring.
think that's the same with Beth Phoenix as well. If she was to have one more, Charlotte.
I was
well,
so
but
disappointed that
Beth Phoenix and
never-
Natalia, because they're both quite similar body types.
Did-
I was
Didn't they
disappointed that Beth Phoenix never went up against Karma.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Oh, I mean, they could obviously throw in. What's her name? Mary Rose, the ginger-haired bird, the one with the ridiculously red hair that nobody liked.
Eva Marie,
Eva Marie,
who is no
bring
longer
back
with the company.
Eva Marie, and throw her in.
We should have put
with-
her on the list.
Yes,
I liked her.
Eva Marie.
Same. For obvious reasons.
For posterity's sake, Dave, Alundra Blaze was offered one more match, and it was at WrestleMania in the Divas Battle Royal,
Oh.
and she declined.
I'm not
Yeah,
surprised.
but she's. However, like it'll get us into a topic later on. But so if Trish was to return, who?
Alexa.
Yes, it has to be, especially with what Alexa's been doing with
Yeah,
Mickey James on the Raw.
that's
like
yeah.
she's really good at insulting these veterans. So all it takes is for whatever reason, if it was in Canada and Trish appears and they're like, we've got another old hag.
Yeah, like look at her in the crowd. What's she doing here? She's coming to watch my
So
my amazing performance.
Yeah.
You know. Oh, I creeping up to the same amount of days that you had as champion. Oh, I'm pretty sure I'm going to overtake you. You know, create all that kind of heat,
Yeah.
especially in Canada and eat that
Well, let's
stuff up as
face
well.
it, give it another year for that feud to happen. She'll probably be on about 8 title reigns. She's on 4 already.
There you go.
So,
Yeah.
and then later, I'd have to go with Sasha Banks.
Yeah, I agree.
Ooh, yeah.
Just because of the style, and it would be cringeworthy with the suicide dive, especially because Lita does it really well, but obviously she had that bad one against Trish. And
Yeah, of course.
every time Sasha Banks does it, I
She
have to close my eyes because
yeah.
I think she's going to kill
She
herself.
overshoots every time.
Yeah, she has this uncanny ability to make it look as though her bones are made of rubber. Whether it's taking a bump from the top rope, whether it's taking a suicide dive or a plancha through the ropes, it just looks like she. And it's the same with Alexa Bliss as well. She has like that double jointed thing. So when you get her in like arm
When
bars
I
and things like
when
that,
I first saw that, I was like,
Oh
oh my
my
god.
yeah, that it. I mean, it just goes to show obviously how well conditioned like the current roster is, and it would be amazing to see any of these women step back in the ring anytime soon.
Yeah, there was one woman that I wanted to put on the list, but I just really couldn't take any of the 4 out, and that'd be Gail Kim. I think Gail
Yeah.
Kim, with the current roster, for me, Gail Kim's one of the best female wrestlers of the past 10, 15 years.
Yeah,
Well,
she's very much an unsung heroine of the women's division.
because she came in when there wasn't really a women's division. It was all bra and panties.
Yeah,
and
that's
she
it.
ended up going to TNA and she was assigned with America's Most Wanted and Jeff Jarrett, and she was the only woman that was on that TV program, and they made the knockouts for her. She ended up obviously becoming the first champion, and she's just carried TNA's women's division, where her, to me, she probably started the women's revolution in wrestling period,
Yeah, well,
because
she
her
was-
matches with Awesome Kong, who was mentioned earlier, were absolutely brilliant. And I was listening to, it was that good. I was listening to an X-Pac podcast, and I can't remember who it was again. I think it might have been when Gail Kim was on it. And X-Pac said, when anybody asks about tips of working bigger wrestlers, he suggests people to go view Gail Kim versus Awesome Kong.
Absolutely.
Even for the males, like it isn't a good small female versus big. It's small wrestler versus big wrestler. The story they told is one of the best for that. For anything, and their matches was incredible. And then she had great feud with Taryn Terrell as well, where they started doing ladder matches and So for me, Gail Kim, if there was 5 slots, Gail Kim would have been number 5. Because I think she started the women's revolution, and it's a shame she can't reap those rewards in WWE.
Absolutely. And we'll move on from the podcast now, but stay on the subject of women as we lead into WWE with Raw. Can I just ask you, who is Sister Abigail?
Well, before that, you're missing one thing about the women. So there was.
Oh, we're missing one thing about the women. Okay, what's the one thing? The one thing that we're missing about women?
The potential women's Royal Rumble.
I will allow you to talk about the potential women's Royal Rumble. Wumble.
Royal Rumble.
Royal Rumble. With Booby Wyatt.
The women's Royal Rumble with
So
Booby Wyatt.
So there's been, I'll say, rumblings.
Wumblings.
That there could be
the one whole podcast.
That there could be a women's Royal Rumble.
Who's in this women's Royal Rumble?
In 2018.
Right.
So would you guys want to
30 women, like
Raw, SmackDown, NXT, everybody on the Mae Young class, like they've got more than enough.
It depends on if they were willing to do a 30. I think maybe a 20 would be more digestible for a casual consumer, maybe someone that hasn't seen the Mae Young Classic and isn't necessarily familiar with all of the great talent that were involved in that, because it means you can spend a majority of the time focusing on the returns and the people that you're aware of on NXT, on Raw, on SmackDown.
I genuinely, I don't know, with the amount that are on Raw and SmackDown, to then have some of the NXT part of it and returns, they might have to do 30.
The important thing about any Rumble, of course, is the unexpected entrance.
Yes.
I mean, you look in the past, so I would like to see in this unexpected entrance in the women's Rumble.
Linda McMahon.
Well, how did you get Linda McMahon, first of all, because she is the unsung diva of WWE. Santina Marella.
Oh.
Because no, and didn't which one of it was it Briscoe that won the a brown panties match?
It was a
Briscoe.
a hardcore title match against Pat Patterson.
There you go, Pat Patterson and Briscoe coming back.
The Stooges.
Yes,
I prefer the return of like.
It was an evening gown match. It was an evening gown hardcore match.
The evening gown makes it sound so much better.
Yeah.
You're going for Eva Marie and
Stacey Keibler.
She's got legs. She knows how to use them. Know her theme. Don't know the hard voice theme.
Amazing.
She's got legs.
It gives an awesome opportunity as well for people like Lana to be involved in the fray. Possibly someone like Renee Young.
What's Sable doing these days?
Getting pounded by Brock Lesnar.
Could she? Is she
She
still?
could. Do you know?
Sonny!
If she can walk
Sonny,
properly.
yeah.
Sonny!
Yeah.
Oh, Sonny could come back.
Yeah.
She's got prior engagements.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Shall I Google these prior
No,
engagements?
I will.
And that will be the reason why
We will
she cannot.
put the prior engagements in the show notes down below where Sonny spends her time. In Australia, obviously.
But yeah, so speaking of the Royal Rumble, Lita did a Q&A recently where she said she'd love to see it. There's enough women on Raw, SmackDown, NXT in the Mae Young Classic.
Yes.
And she was like, the way the Women's Revolution started was through a hashtag, so she wanted the hashtag Women's Royal Rumble to start getting put out there on Twitter.
Nixon Newell.
Yep, it was a shame she wasn't in the Mae Young Classic through injury.
She got injured. She's, as far as I'm aware, she's still over in America.
Yeah, she actually signed a contract with WWE.
That would be an absolutely fantastic way to introduce one of Britain's young best wrestlers. People like, obviously, Kaylee Ray, Toni Storm. and we've got loads of up and coming young female wrestlers as well. Sierra Loxton, Bea Priestley, all of whom, I mean, there was a recent thing where I want to say it was either William Regal or Triple H. It probably was Regal because I'm picturing his accent. I'm not going to do his accent because it turns out I can't do accents. My fellow people tell me. Fellow people on the podcast, not friends. That makes it sound bad for you guys. Anyway, back to the William Regal thing. He said that people often say to him, have you heard of, have you seen X wrestler? And his response was, yes, we will have seen them. We will know of the people you're thinking of because they've got their eyes on all markets everywhere.
Yeah.
Unlike, I mean, even 10 years ago, where if I said to you, oh, have you seen Wrestler X? You'd go, oh no, where can I see stuff? Oh, well, you'll have to go to a tape trader or go to a show and it's 100 and 200 miles away. But I'll leave it then. Now, as you said, as James said earlier on, I thought you were Jamie for a second there. As James said earlier on, YouTube, Wikipedia, all of the information is always out there.
Go.
Yeah. Oh, incidentally, Progress did an all-women show recently. There was only one man's match on it, and some of the fans were a bit disappointed at that. At least a man didn't climb a ladder to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. That's all we'll say on that.
Yeah, so let's move on to
Let's
Raw.
move on to
No.
Yeah.
We still have another point.
Paul?
Okay.
All right, okay.
Okay, so
Peas.
in the Q&A with Lita as well, she was discussing the possibility of women tag titles, and she did mention there has been talks of doing a women's tag title. Like, I don't know how they'll do it. Would it be in NXT? Would it just be on Raw? Would it be just on SmackDown? Or do you think it might be a cross-brand title?
Well, this is something that the WWF...
The Bellas will be the first champions.
It's something that the WWF has done previously, back in the 80s, the Golden Girls, the Jumping Bomb Angels... but back then in the 80s,
the
though,
Jumping Bomb Angels is a brilliant name as well.
It's awesome.
Them.
They were absolutely awesome.
Yes.
And obviously, it was something that WWF and the McMahons took pride in, was the fact that they had representation for both, because you had a singles women's title and you had tag titles as well. Sadly, they decided as the division kind of dwindled down, and they realised that they wanted to do something else. So there, somewhere locked in a vault in Titan Towers, there are women's tag title belts, not divas tag title, women's.
What a noble concept.
Traditional, old-fashioned gold signet ring-looking belts.
Imagine having those either remodeled or just brought
Restored.
Over. Yeah, absolutely.
It would be an incredible thing. What a way to light a fire, to light that spark under everybody. If Triple H or somebody high up went into the vault in Titan Towers and just uploaded a picture to Instagram or Twitter or something, can you imagine the talking point that would cause? Just look, they're there. We can bring them out of retirement. It's easily done.
They'll make new belts.
If I was somebody like Triple H I was going to say, or Stephanie, except I'm a boy. If I was Triple H, I would just take a picture of them anyway and tweet it and say, what do you think, guys, and see how people react.
That's it. See what happens.
Talking about reactions, let's talk about Raw. Who's Sister Abigail?
Who do you think it'll be? Do you think it'll
Well, I've got a theory about this. Sister Abigail has to be, I've decided, an influential figure in the life of the Wyatts. An older, but still quite sultry woman. There's only one woman for this role, Linda McMahon.
How has Linda been influenced, and involved with the Wyatts?
It's just Dave with his weird love for Linda McMahon.
Imagine if
she comes out dressed like what was her name? The valet for Voodoo King Mafia.
Oh, I thought you were going to say dressed as the valet.
No.
What's her name? Sable.
No.
Oh.
Voodoo King Mafia. Kip James and to the one. God, my memory is awful.
No,
For a short period of time,
yes.
because of their namesake, despite the fact that it was a parody and the two of them were misogynists, that was their character in TNA at the time. They had a valet.
Kip James and BG James.
BG James, yeah, sorry. For some reason, they had a valet who was like a New Orleans style voodoo practitioner, but she was a white woman.
Oh, right. Like Linda, yes.
Dressed in like a veil, like a kind of
Linda's probably got a veil.
ethereal voodoo bride, and she did nothing. She didn't talk. She just came to the ring and then left. For no reason.
Right. I've seen
sister,
Linda McMahon cut promos, her just turning up at the ring, not saying anything, and going away again will be fantastic. Trust me. But imagine it. The music plays for what are they called, the Wyatts. That music plays, that follow the buzzards. Don't know, is that how it goes? How does their song go? It's look in my eyes. What do I see?
That's CM Punk.
The cult of personality. And they do
Jesus
that
Christ,
thing
Dave.
where he brings out the little
lantern.
lantern that goes from being an oil-powered lantern when they're backstage going, we're here, to the battery-powered one that's producing a lot of smoke.
Right,
I would be
yeah,
worried
it is,
about
yeah.
that as he brings it to the
It
ring.
needs pat testing.
It does.
Yeah.
It definitely is pat testing. But the lights come up, and in the ring is stood Linda McMahon, still in the wheelchair.
So is that your prediction then?
That's
No,
my
right,
prediction.
let's
I've
get
not seen Raw. I'm
let's
assuming
get
that's what it
serious.
means.
So
Serious.
Yeah,
Oh, this
let's
is a
get
serious
serious.
podcast.
well, no, just enough of Linda McMahon.
Right, so serious suggestions here.
Okay.
There's talks that Bray could be Sister Abigail in a different.
I think that's the way
Now,
we're going.
Santino Marella was a woman.
No, well,
Did
like
you see-
before we get to like Kate, that's not me trying to cut off Kate. It's just there are a number of possible ways that we could go about this. Several people have already addressed this. Adam Blompier, he did how WWE should book on this subject, and he
Yes.
gave a very compelling
Erudite,
argument about Alexa Bliss.
Oh.
And how she, with her being a heel, she's very conniving, she's very manipulative. She tricks Bray into thinking that she is Sister Abigail and like creates this whole kind of elaborate ruse and is able to kind of bend him to her will. And she always has, you know, like despite the fact that she's a women's champion and she's competing in matches, which is something that technically Sister Abigail wouldn't do because she's meant to be this all-powerful overseeing entity. You know, he's there protecting her, making sure that there's nobody running interference. But compelling as that is, how
That
could
just makes
But-
Bray
oh,
glorified.
no.
that's it? It
No,
makes him a
but
glorified valet.
Imagine if Alexa Bliss was this conniving person who convinces Bray that she is the living embodiment of Sister Abigail. He discovers that she is a false prophet, and he's put all of his life into this idea of worshipping it. It would send him over the edge.
Which
If you think
his-
he's mad now, imagine being a religious fanatic, of which there are very few in the world, but imagine you are being a religious fanatic and you find that your God isn't your God.
Isn't that what?
Why does God
isn't,
need a star shape?
Isn't that what Mordecai was?
Mordecai was brilliant. Now there's
He
a
was
character
great.
they should come back. The idea of Mordecai was better than the Mordecai. But
somebody
imagine how that would break you to discover that your God isn't God.
It'd be good, but I wouldn't use Alexa Bliss for this sole purpose. Alexa Bliss is already
No.
she's already established a character. She doesn't need it.
No.
Essentially, it could ruin Alexa Bliss.
Could be Paige.
A lot of
Paige.
Again,
Rumours she's coming back.
I mean,
Yeah.
like she's
Yes.
always had that alternative goth
Mm.
look. She's very pale skinned with the black hair
Yeah,
and the black like leather
absolutely.
and studs
And
and
you could
everything.
imagine her being good in that combination in matches as well.
Yeah, like
You know,
being,
the
I mean,
dangerous character.
and she's already shown that she like the way that she can like move and maneuver a body.
Yeah.
Like she can be very sultry, very seductive. The way that she, like when she was having a feud, that really unusual lesbian pollen thing that she had with AJ Lee, and there was
Yeah.
like, you know, like sliding and grinding up and down each other as they were going for pins and stuff. You're like, that's a bit weird.
Well, look
But
at
imagine if she came out and she did her own version of the demon entrance that Finn Balor does, where she's crawling on her hands and knees and that, you know, doing this really ethereal kind of rising and moving, and it always looks as though she's got more limbs than she actually has. Like she's got this elaborate dress and stuff. There's all kinds of things.
Obviously, it's highly unlikely to ever be this name, but imagine Karma in that type of role. You know, like the almost like a
You
goddess
really like
of death
Canada,
thing.
yeah.
I thought, I'm going back to what we were saying earlier about Awesome Kong versus Gail Kim, but
you know, you mentioned that, but the more I think about it, the more realistic that seems.
the
because
dolls,
wasn't
the dolls
it
where she
mentioned-
broke the dolls in the video.
Yeah.
That
And
just
wasn't it mentioned that Sister Abigail was, I don't know if I'm getting it wrong, but she was supposedly a black woman in the, like, I don't know, swamps or something.
Yeah, I get the idea, because he's meant to be like a
look at that,
Mississippi,
yes.
like redneck out in the middle of nowhere. You know, like you think about the Mississippi, Louisiana, the kind of heritage, the history, this whole voodoo thing it leans into, which is why I brought up the whole like Valley, you know, with, the Voodoo King Mafia.
There was, like, the Page idea would have been great if she'd never been on TV.
Yes,
Because I
and
think
she'd never opened her mouth.
She has the looks. She's great on the mic.
No, she is, but she's very clearly British,
Yeah.
and that's the problem.
Yeah.
She's
So-
already established
Yeah,
herself as a
governor.
British.
But yeah,
I'm
so
from the Bayous, I
again,
am.
I think again it's somebody
That's
that's
my British accent.
yeah, that
for
was-
you all there.
I think again it's somebody that's established her name already where she wouldn't need it. There was one NXT superstar that's
Nikki Storm.
I don't.
I was thinking.
She's already with Sanity.
That's the only thing, isn't it? She's already with Sanity. But
Stop
imagine if
thinking
they
of
could
people would
bottle,
give it to Freddie.
if they could bottle Nikki Storm and give her to somebody else.
Yeah.
Give
Storm in
that
a bottle.
whole to
Nikki
to,
Storm's probably the best personality of a female wrestler in WWE.
and what I mean. The worst thing is if you have another character like her, we're always going to compare her. So
Yeah.
so Sister Abigail has to be something else.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
I don't know if it was just this superstar trying to get herself some attention on social media, but Sage Beckett, she was in the Mae Young Classic, she tweeted just #Raw with a picture of a woman with a fire behind her, which would be fitting considering Randy Orton burnt down
The shack.
the shack with her grave, and it was "They're all lies, darling."
Oh.
Which in the promo on Raw, Bray was showing that he was cracking up even more and he was losing it more than he's already lost it. And he was like, "It's all lies, it's all lies, it's all lies." So is this, and this is how I think they should do it. If they are going to have Sister Abigail as a female and not Bray's alter ego, it needs to be somebody that's not established on TV, where it's a gimmick change. I think it's a good opportunity to bring up somebody fresh from developmental. And
My only problem with that is, if it was her, she shouldn't have used Twitter, because if she's...
she might have been told to.
If she's this dead Sister Abigail, or she's
Yeah,
been WhatsApp, so like, first thing she does is go on Twitter to post about it.
Yeah,
So
it's,
it's
it's,
always
Oh
the magic
no,
over it.
guys! When
You know.
It's a
God,
TV show.
when the
Just
one
saying.
true God
Kayfabe's
makes his
dead.
return, the way that he's going to announce it is through Snapchat. Let's face
Probably.
it.
Yeah.
Sending a dick pic.
Yeah.
well, well,
Let me just because
Um,
go on, keep talking, guys.
I
'cause
think
I'm having
I
a
think
moment.
it's an interesting idea. Them alluding to Bray, like as much as I mean, we've all spoken about how we feel the feud promo wise between Bray Wyatt and Balor has been subpar. The in ring has proven that like quite the opposite, and they had quite a decent match on the last pay per view. And it was a nice development for Balor because he beat Bray first as the Demon, then he came out as himself, and they built the entire match around the fact that, like, you know, you're living in your head, you're living in on all these false dreams. The Demon is my creation. It isn't something else. It's something I control, and it's man-made. I made it, and me as a man is better than you with your fake your fake gods, your false prophets.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting way of putting the entire belief system that Wyatt has kind of like held his entire character in it, like as a crux for several years now. Balor, who is a very respected in-ring performer, doesn't have anything to prove, is showing that he can have great matches, and when put against the right person can help to kind of start to fix that stale alignment that sadly Bray Wyatt's fallen into. And now obviously we're talking about this Sister Abigail thing because it is a hot talking point. Suddenly Bray Wyatt is relevant again.
The promo on Raw was fantastic because it was a different side to Bray, and it wasn't just mumbling some cryptic stuff. It actually
had direction,
made sense, and it was like I said, something different. And I'm quite curious on like how long we're actually running for at the moment. But
no, it's fine. I've still got plenty of talk. I mean, when Bray did his little promo this week, were the audience there catching flies in their mouths? Which, as we all know, is the opening line to the Bray Wyatt theme that I know.
Did you just look that up?
I was looking at something else. I typed brain on my phone and it auto-corrected it to breast. That took me by surprise somewhat. So clearly I wasn't. Okay.
What if it was Jojo?
Breast Wyatt. Oh, snap.
Anyway, yes, away from Sister Abigail. Did anything else happen on Raw?
So, again, Miz Appreciation Week.
Here we go. We need a sound effect, don't we? For
Sorry,
Miz Appreciation.
Miz Appreciation Week.
Just
Has anybody ever...
Yeah, soundbite of awesome.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Has anybody ever been to a red carpet event with The Miz?
Yeah, funny you should say, actually.
Oh, really? I
yeah.
heard this
We've only
story.
mentioned it 4 times, I think. now.
Every week. Yeah, funny you should say.
Okay.
But, no, what did you... So, I tend to lead the reign on the Miz Appreciation Week, but I'll let you guys chirp in about it. What did you think of...
Where do we start? I mean...
Well, his Shield entrance with...
The Shield entrance with Sheamus and Cesaro, the...
Axel and Bo.
Oh, Axel and Bo, sorry, with the fist bump at the end. The beatdown on Reigns was good as well.
For the second week running, he's been destroyed, and it made sense for TV purposes as well, because they'd already attacked Rollins and Ambrose. This is Sheamus and Cesaro attacked Rollins and Ambrose at the beginning of the show. So then, during the match, Roman Reigns hasn't forgot what the three of them did to him last week, so he takes out Axel and Bo, and then Sheamus and Cesaro go for Roman Reigns, and I liked the bit where they was just walking off, and it was, what are they chanting for? Are they wanting Shield? Are they wanting the Shield? Let's go give them the Shield, and then they stand up on the apron, and they're doing the 3 moves, and they do the power bomb with Miz power bombing Roman Reigns. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant.
I thought Raw was really good. Like, there wasn't much that happened apart from the Shield stuff and Braun.
And Enzo Amore bring the Zosha to
life. Oh gosh, yeah. Like, is this the second week in a row he's main evented Raw?
Yeah, so the Cruiserweights have main evented Raw 2 weeks running. Prior to that, they were just basically the toilet break. And I just think it's just been given a new lease of life, and I loved the fact where they all came round and surrounding the ring, and Enzo's like, "You can't touch me, you'll get fired," and just starts insulting each and every one of them. And it goes to Cedric Alexander. He's like, "Is that a scuba top? What's that? You got schmedium?" And you can see Cedric Alexander trying not to laugh. And
Do you think that was unscripted? That whole segment?
So I think it was scripted. Say something about each and every one of them.
Yeah.
Because Drew Gulak almost started laughing, and a few of the others nearly started laughing, and then the huge signing of Kalisto. Don't think it's that huge. He's already on Raw.
It's the right move.
Oh, it's the right move.
Yeah.
But I was like, have they got somebody from SmackDown or NXT? Because it was like a huge signing. I thought he's already signed to Raw, but I thought that was a good move for Kalisto versus Enzo moving forward.
Did anything interesting happen on SmackDown?
Well, on the end of Raw.
Oh, there's more on Raw.
So,
Mr. I'm worried how long we've been talking. Let me tell you more about 3 hours. Do you want to? I mean, 3.
So, are we really going to ignore the fact that the Shield was on screen for the first time in
Oh, when they
Well,
teased the fist bump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as Roman Reigns is sat backstage after the cruiserweight segment, Dean Ambrose walks up, the crowd pop, loudest they've been all night. Then Seth Rollins walks into the pitch and they're all stood there and they don't do the fist bump yet. But
But Dean's
the left,
playing with his fist,
yeah,
and he.
and they just left it at that as well. And I thought that's how you write a TV show. It's
Did
next
they
week
not
as
do
well.
the fist bump?
no.
No. Next week, as you guys probably already know, Indianapolis. That's where the Shield formed. It's where they broke up, and it's where they're going to reunite. Everything's happened in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I just thought it was absolutely brilliant, like TV writing, because they finished on something that excited the crowd. They didn't give them everything at once, so now everybody can't wait to tune in for Raw to see the Shield back together and see what's
I
going to happen with the
genuinely
Shield.
hope that Raw starts off next week with them all there in the same positions.
There you go. The continuity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Different venue, but same
That's it.
positions.
No, they'd already
Like
walked
travellers.
But
Did anything interesting happen on SmackDown?
But sorry, just before we
All
address
right,
this,
we're not talking about
no,
SmackDown
no,
now.
I'm sorry. Breaking. So the Bleacher Report have announced the full list of ratings for WWE 2K18,
Right.
and Brock Lesnar isn't the highest rated, despite what you'd think, despite him being the Universal
Stupid.
Champion, despite him being the powerhouse.
unless Roman Reigns
the-
is higher.
So
That
what?
is
What
the
are the
So
rates?
I'm going to go through some of the top ratings.
Okay.
Right.
I can you can skip ahead a little bit
You won't want
if
to.
you want to. So I'll go from
In fact, we're disabling
high
skip.
so high 80s into the top because it's listed in alphabetical order. So I'll
Okay.
list off notable mentions. So
Yeah.
AJ Styles
Right.
90, Asuka
What are the ratings? Sorry, because I don't play video games because I'm not a nerd.
you have a score out of 100 and that determines how high your stats are. So if you were
Oh, right,
the highest,
okay.
if you were
it's
100,
like a game of top trumps.
it is. Well done,
Oh.
David. Thank you for joining the discussion.
Yes.
Anyway, as I said, AJ Styles 90,
Right. Okay.
Asuka 87.
Oh.
I think that is possibly the highest rated woman in any previous
Definitely.
wrestling game. Let's see now. Braun Strowman 88.
Mm-hmm.
Only 88,
I
not in the
heard that.
90s. Brock Lesnar 93. Very, very understandable. Ambrose 88. Balor 88. Demon Balor 92.
Nice.
Let's see now. Jinder Mahal, our current WWE champion, 88, the same as Dean Ambrose, the same as Finn Balor. Kevin Owens, 88.
They like 88.
They do. Let's see. Randy Orton, 90. The big one, Roman Reigns, 95.
It's 'cause he's a big dog.
Joe, 88. Rollins, the cover, 92. He's not even in the, among the. Well, I mean, he is among the top technically.
He might
but-
be on the top. He might be on the cover, but let's not get unrealistic.
No,
with
no, of
him
course.
being as good as.
Nakamura, 89. So, above most. Triple H, 89.
Nakamura should be higher on
The
that.
Undertaker, 89. And that seems to be it for,
He's getting
say,
old.
like the top 10, top 12. So that's some pretty decent ones, but it's weird to see. Well, it's weird, but it's also understandable to see they've kept the 90 and above score very precious. There's very few.
I'm okay with that.
There's very
yeah.
few 91, like there's no 91s, there's only one or two 90s, very few 92s.
I probably won't get it. I got last year's and I traded it in 2 days later and bought Matthew instead.
I'll be honest with you. I can't play wrestling games. Every other game I'm great at, apart from Cuphead. But wrestling games not so much.
There's another breaking news. To touch upon what we were speaking about regarding Bubblegum earlier. So Bubblegum's just posted that he's just come back from a specialist and they think he may have damaged one of his discs. He's still waiting on the MRI scan for 100% confirmation. But what hurts the most is he's rumoured to not be 3 to 4 weeks out, but 3 to 4 months out of action.
Oh, shit.
So what we said earlier regarding the Just Giving and attending TNT, please try and get down to that. Also, other promoters, hopefully they'll try and book Bubblegum for. It's still a great personality. So yeah, 3 to 4 months, which means he'll miss out on Global Wars with Rocky Romero, and that puts him. He's not going to be wrestling again until next year.
That is a real shame.
Yep. So wish you all the best.
Yeah,
Pip.
that's it. Well wishes.
Thoughts out with bubblegum. Let's move on to. Did anything interesting happen on SmackDown? And I think that says everything we need to know about Smack. Oh,
There was some.
There was
There was a
Interval?
stupid. No, there was a stupid thing between Kevin Owens and Shane McMahon.
Did you not enjoy that?
Well, no,
I liked
the
it.
brawl I really liked, but the announcement that the Hell in a Cell match is going to be a false count anywhere is the most contradicting thing I've ever heard. They're inside Hell in a Cell to be inside the fucking cell, not to be false count anywhere. It's defeating the fucking object.
well,
That's true.
how about where is this is taking
It's
place
like-
at
it's
Hell in
like
a
having
Cell?
Yeah, and
What's
it
the
is
capacity of the venue?
It is a Hell in a Cell match.
What's the capacity of the venue? Do we know what we say? 16,000. Imagine falls count anywhere, but the 16,000 people are in the cell. And the match takes place outside of it.
I
This
feel,
this is the type of creative thinking those Smacky D writers need. Smacky D is what we call it in the business,
Yeah,
people, because the writers appear to be on smack.
It's stupid. It's like having a title ladder match, but saying you can win by pinfall.
Oh, don't. Oh.
Like why?
No, I think
First
they
one
had.
thrown out of the Royal Rumble wins.
No, I think
Yeah.
I think all along they had the idea that they wanted to take this match out into the crowd, out into the stands, out further into the concessions, and I think it was just a coincidence that it fell into Hell in a Cell. They needed to big up,
I just think
a grudge match, a blood feud in Hell in a Cell. I don't mind the fact that it's false count anywhere because, to be honest, when you look at Shane McMahon, what was the first thing he did when he returned?
Okay.
I'm going to dive off the top of the Hell in a
There's one
Cell.
way they can make it make sense in the fact that it doesn't start in the cell.
Yeah.
You could have it start backstage.
Like what Ambrose and Rollins
yeah,
did.
starts backstage. You fight your way to the ring, but once you're in the cell, we're locking the doors. You can
Yeah,
fight
but
outside.
they'll
You
probably-
can pin each other outside, but if you go in the cell, the door's getting locked.
Yeah, but they'll probably break out and then go do the pinfall near the table or something. But
But at least try and enforce some.
it's,
rules.
Yeah,
it's,
that- I
fucking-
mean,
it's
and-
fucking it's
No, but
stupid.
this is exactly what we spoke about
It
in,
is.
in our heat about the wrestling, if it's a sport or not. It's establishing rules, and now we're starting to see, as Kurt has mentioned, that the rules are contradicting themselves. I think that it's just a happy coincidence, and they were always going to do this.
I just think Shane and Kevin Owens are shitting themselves because they're going to get blown out of the water by New Day and Usos.
That's true, but I mean, to be honest,
Uso Penitentiary.
that's what they've called it, the Uso Penitentiary.
That's what it calls.
Yeah,
About
I-
2 months ago.
yeah.
I'm
said it.
disappointed.
I thought they could have come up with a better name. That's not to say that it was a bad name, Kurt. I'm not dissing you at all. But you'd think that the creative writers who job it is to write this stuff could have thought of a clever,
I think
like
that
with
is
brothers,
good.
like B,
No, it is-
like some kind of alliteration.
No,
like,
so the reason being is so
are
it's-
either of them
it's-
jailbirds? Have either of them been in
So
prison?
it's the character. So it's the character that they were saying like throughout their new gimmick change that SmackDown Live, the tag team division, it's the Uso Penitentiary and they've got it on lockdown.
Oh,
So
that's
now
clever,
it's the
yeah.
connotation that
the
cell
cell
is locked in.
yeah, it's the literal cell.
So that's
yeah.
why I was
Yeah.
saying a couple of months ago that at Hell in a Cell they need to be inside it so the Usos can call it the Uso Penitentiary.
Now-
And they did on SmackDown. I was like, you're going to be locked inside the Uso Penitentiary.
And did you mark out? And did you immediately tweet?
I was
it?
like, oh no, I tweeted it a while ago. I was like, I'm not going to tweet it again, but I thought.
Purely out of interest, are any of the matches in Hell in a Cell Punjabi prison matches?
no, we've already had that
It's
once.
because-
Punjabi prison inside the Hell in a Cell.
Inside of a war game cell,
Oh, that would be brilliant.
but it's false count anywhere. Oh no,
Oh, yeah.
it's false count outside the structures.
Yes.
So
yes.
they've got to climb out the cage,
Yeah.
to then climb out the Punjabi prison, to then
Yeah.
smash out the Hell in a Cell,
Yeah.
to then smash out the war games,
Right.
to then pin them on the ramp.
I'd go with that. I would like to see I'm hoping they have a Hell in a Cell match where it is by pinfall, or you can only be pinned if one man is inside the cell and the other man is outside it. That seems to be the
Or
way
they should
they're
just
going
do
with all
one.
of this.
First one to get put through the cell.
Yes. Yes. Incidentally, one of the reasons why the overweight cruiserweight Jamie Bell isn't here is because I said I wanted to take a photo of him behind a fence, and it would have to be a metal bar fence, just so that we could Instagram it as Bell in a Cell. That's the type of fun guy he is.
Speaking on Hell in a Cell,
predictions.
let's do our predictions.
Let's do it.
So
What we're starting with.
we'll find Mr. Bell's.
Yeah, should we just get Jamie's predictions all out the way, then we'll make ours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Jamie's
Or
predictions
we
are.
can go through the matches and then I'll say what Jamie.
I think
sure.
Jamie.
Randy
My
Orton versus
understanding
Rusev.
was Kurt described Jamie's predictions as the Shinsuke Nakamura of predictions.
Right, okay.
So were they really good predictions?
You hate Shinsuke Nakamura. Stop trying to rewrite history, Big
We'll find out.
Russo.
Okay, let's Randy Orton versus Rusev, yeah?
Yeah. So
I'm having a look.
Jamie went with Rusev.
Orton. I want Rusev to win because he is a great talent. Who is he working alongside? Kind of at the minute,
Aiden
English.
Yeah, like they've got like a weird kind of buddy heel thing going on where they're like helping each other out in matches. I'd like to think that Aiden English could play a part in Rusev winning, but I don't know. I think Orton's still cashing in the sweet. Look what I did for you, getting Jinder over points because it matters to me how many wins and losses I have because I'm Randy Orton, and the rules don't apply to me.
Who are you going with, James?
I'm gonna go with Orton.
Okay.
Orton.
Dave.
Orton or Rusev.
I can keep track of two names.
Just making sure in your old age, like you can get quite forgetful.
Orton.
I'm going with Rusev.
Then Jamie's gone with Rusev. Any changes? Orton, Rusev?
No, I'm gonna stick with Orton.
The next match in the card is Bobby Roode versus Dolph Ziggler.
So Jamie went for Bobby Roode. I'm gonna go for Bobby Roode.
It's got to be Rude.
Bobby Roode.
Right, anyway, yeah.
Dave.
It is going to be Bobby Roode. I would put a bet on that, except historically I've always lost wrestling.
You have to
bets.
understand as well, I am a huge Ziggler mark. I absolutely love him.
I think his new gimmick's class.
It's
yeah,
amazing.
it is, and that is.
I
getting
can't
under
wait to see
everyone's
what his
skin.
I hope it's
If he
glorious.
comes out and he parodies, yeah, that would be fantastic. But
Losing the Will to Live Ziggler is my favourite Ziggler.
yeah,
He gives no fucks.
yeah, that's it.
He's like, oh, look at me, I'm so good, and he just doesn't care anymore.
No, it's great.
So
Brilliant.
AJ Styles versus Baron Corbin for the US title.
Oh, no, that can only have one winner.
Who's that?
AJ Styles.
That's who I'm going. I've got a feeling Corbin may finally get a singles title, but I made that mistake last predictions where I wanted Miz and I was sure Miz could win, but then I still went with Jordan, so I'm going to go with Styles beating Corbin. James?
Styles. I think Corbin will have a great match, and it will put.
Ty
Faith-
Dillinger can cost him.
I don't even think it'll be that. I just think Corbin just needs to be having good matches. Regardless of wins and losses, he just needs to be having good matches to
He
show.
just needs better material to speak about on
Yeah.
the mic.
That's it. So I think AJ is gonna.
Callum?
Baron Corbin.
Okay, Jamie went with Baron Corbin as well. So now the SmackDown Women's Championship match, Natalya versus Charlotte Flair. So Jamie thinks Natalya's going to retain.
I do too.
I'm going to go with Charlotte. It wouldn't surprise me, just to give Charlotte an extra title reign, Charlotte wins and Carmella cashes in to get the belt.
Ooh.
And then next time Charlotte will get it off Carmella. Then before you know it, Charlotte's got 2 more title reigns to, 5 so far?
I think Natalya wins the match.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Carmella cashes in on Natalya instead.
I think Charlotte.
I'm going with Charlotte.
Historically, Charlotte has beaten Natalya before. Back in NXT, you know, she's proven that she can go.
And
numerous
Natalya
times.
made Charlotte tap out on SmackDown, so I've got a feeling that Charlotte will
Yeah.
Next
get that one.
match.
So the next
New
match,
Day.
the Uso Penitentiary, Hell in a Cell. New Day
for-
versus Usos.
Why do we say Xavier? I think JBL
It's
says
Xavier.
Xavier, which is how you're meant to pronounce it if you're educated, but other people got Xavier.
I've heard Xavier pronounce it Xavier though.
Probably
X-Men.
for the
Yeah.
uneducated.
Xavier,
yeah.
So
It's
But it's Xavier
Xavier.
Woods.
I think it's
Xavier.
whatever way you.
Xavier. Hee-haw.
Well-
Sorry, that was a terrible French
the
accent.
Usos did it in the rap battle when he was like, "Don't go rated R like your boy Xavier Woods." Or did he say Xavier? I don't know. So
Right, yeah.
New Day versus Usos.
New Day are the champions. New Day return.
Mr. Bell's gone for Usos to win.
Oh, this is hard. This is the hardest one to call.
New Day have got to win. This feud has been going on for months. This match is going to be the culmination of all of this work that
What's
they've
the next
done.
pay-per-view for SmackDown? Is it Survivor Series where it's going to be a joint one?
Probably.
Potentially.
I
Who
imagine
can
it's
say?
right.
Watch Usos win to carry it on, and then Survivor Series. Let's have an Iron Man tag match.
Well, did you hear the rumour that they want the New Day to lose the titles pretty much every pay per view
to get
to get them
to get
the title
hardest.
reigns? To be the longest, have the most reigns out of any team.
I d-
So I'm going with Usos for that reason.
But why are they doing that so that they can overthrow the Dudleys? Is it the Dudleys that
I
hold
think
the,
that I think
Dudders.
or is it Edge and Christmas?
I think it's either the Hardys or Dudleys. I'm not sure.
So why would you want to? Why would you want to do
Because-
the Hardys when the Hardys are still a part of your company?
But
They've already
You-
demolished
but New Day-
demolitions.
yeah.
Ironically,
Guys.
they're wanting to
Can we
make.
not reflect on Rip Rogers said and not overanalyze
they
it?
just wanted to
It's
make
a
New
sport.
Day. Yeah, they just wanted to make New Day the greatest tag team
Yeah,
with
well,
the longest days reigns and the most title reigns. I'm gonna go with Usos.
I'm going to go with New Day.
So Dave's
Can
got
I-
New Day. New Day. Okay,
I'll
brilliant.
introduce the next match. Jinder Mahal,
The
the
modern day
champion,
Maharaja.
versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Let's have a look what Kurt thinks of this one.
See, I'm thinking Nakamura wins. However, a couple of days afterwards they're in India.
Yeah, they are.
So I don't know. I'm in two minds. Are they going to do what they did with Shinsuke in Japan with the NXT title, where he lost to Joe, then he wins the title back in? Did he win the title back in Japan? Or am I getting my wrestlers mixed there?
Am I getting my wrestlers
Somebody
mixed
was saying
there?
yesterday, I don't know if it's one of you guys, but Jinder's not on the tour.
Yeah, he is. Triple H has just announced it.
Oh
Yeah,
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 that's
so
good. I
he's
was going to
just
say
like-
that.
he's
yeah.
like front and
Ridiculous.
center on one of the
He
posters.
just
yeah.
wasn't on the poster
Okay.
until they've updated
Yeah.
it. So yeah, Jinder's on the tour. So are they going to have Shinsuke win and Jinder get the belt back in India and make a big deal about it?
Oh yeah, I
Or-
think as marketing, it makes sense for him.
But India,
to,
India are behind him, are they?
No, but that's why you make him the chaser. You can always sympathise with an underdog chasing for the title, and like they keep banging on and on and on about the fact that as soon as Shinsuke hits the Kinshasa, Mahal has no chance. So if he
Great
can,
Khali returns.
I think taking into account the dates in India, I think Nakamura is going to win, and I think it's going to take one Kinshasa to take him out, and he's going to probably batter the Singh brothers outside as well and be able to do it, and then they'll be able to have the retribution in the house shows when they're doing the tour, like
So-
really start to build up Mahal kind of back up again as this underdog when he's
who
chasing
wins
for
it? Hell
I think
in a
it's
Cell.
Nakamura.
You think Nakamura?
Yeah, I think
Jamie's gone
Nakamura's
for
the-
Jinder Mahal. Dave.
Jinder Mahal returns.
Okay.
You can edit out the silence. It'll
Jin-
cut down the amount of running time.
Jinder returns.
Shinsuke.
Next, match number 2.
Sorry,
Oh right. Oh you want an opinion
yeah,
as
I
well?
want to.
Right. Okay. Let's all
they'll take-
listen to what's your name? Callum's opinion.
Shinsuke.
Shinsuke. Oh, that was worth it. No, it was Shinsuke. He's apparently all right.
Solidarity.
Yeah.
High five from the two bros at the end of the table there, who are now doing fist bumps. The I assume it's going to be the co-main event. Will be Kevin Owens versus Linda McMahon's
I'm gonna go
favourite son.
Shinsuke. They can't make him
Did I
win.
not?
I don't know if you can change it once you
Oh,
know, once
there's a
you've
lot
moved
to-
on. We need a rule book.
That's
for
it.
this.
It's a penitentiary.
Just-
It's on lockdown, man.
It's not.
Just to let you all know, that isn't Shinsuke winning the Kevin Owens versus Shane McMahon match.
I'm just thinking about they can't have Shinsuke lose 2 title matches at pay-per-views in a row.
This is Kurt Johansson trying to make up for all of the Shinsuke hate he's done since this podcast
They just
started.
can't do it.
Shinsuke wins.
Shinsuke.
Boom.
Kevin Owens versus Linda McMahon's favourite son, Shane.
Surely Kevin Owens has to win.
Surely.
But I'm thinking Shane's had 2 matches, and well, he's had the Survivor Series match, but 2 singles matches and lost them both. Does he want that W?
I've heard there's a chance he might be moving back to Raw to continue the feud. How do you continue it if he won?
Yeah, that's true. Yes. So who are we saying? Kurt?
I don't know yet. I'm thinking.
Okay, Kurt can't make up his mind between 2 names.
Wait, how many other matches are on the card?
One more.
Which
One
is
more.
the pre-show match?
Oh, okay. I think
Shinsuke.
Shinsuke is to send everybody home happy. So I think Owens is going to win. I think Owens, the better in-ring performer. Well, I mean, again, that's debatable because McMahon can go. But
Shane looks more like the athlete.
that's I mean, if we're being pedantic, but Shane can go. There's a reason why this feud has some weight to it. So I think Owens will be the winner because he's the more kind of in-ring conditioned. He can go despite what he looks like. He can go, and it shows as well when you look at SmackDown. He can take a beating. You can put him down, and he doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. And that's always been the case with him. That's why he's such a great character. So I think he's going to be ruthless enough.
Do you think Shane's winning? Are you going to go
No,
Shane?
I think Owens. I think
Yeah,
Owens.
Owens has to.
Yeah,
I've got to go for Owens.
I'm going to go for Owens too.
Jamie has gone for Owens. Watch Sami Zayn cost Kevin Owens, and they'll do Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens feud for the 100th time.
Yeah,
in
and
WWE.
that's the thing as well. Like with this being Falls Count Anywhere, they're gonna leave the cell. There is more than likely a chance of people interfering. The fact that Owens has made himself an enemy of the McMahons, like not just of Shane, but of all of them. There is I mean, I don't know why, but can you imagine they're fighting backstage and Triple H just opens a door and pedigrees him and
the
he's like,
gauntlet of McMahons. in every room there's another McMahon boss waiting for him.
He just nuts them all.
Including Linda.
He just nuts her,
Yeah.
moves on, get down. But yeah, Triple H comes in, pedigrees him, all that.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, yes.
Be entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to take another short break because we've been going for what appears to be 7 hours so far on this 50-minute podcast, and I want to wee. I don't really want to wee, I'm lying.
Yeah,
I've had one already. Okay, we'll see you soon. And we are back for the final segment of the show. I promise you, as we bring you the 3 count.
1, 2, 3.
That's the end of me pausing for effect there. I just didn't die of boredom. So what are our 3 big topics of the week? Let's face it, the big news of the week was the NWA, which is Billy Corgan, formerly of 9 Inch Nails,
Smashing
Pumpkins, who did all of those songs, and TNA fame, bringing back the rap group NWA.
yeah. That's
So-
exactly what he's doing.
So NWA is one of the most historic wrestling promotions out there. There's no disputing that. And when Billy Corgan filled in his purchase of TNA Impact Wrestling, he was
Why didn't he buy GFW?
because Jeff Jarrett wasn't selling GFW.
Oh,
His Jeff for Gold scheme is all he needs to cover that cost.
Oh.
But yeah, so Billy Corgan, when he came into TNA, he was putting up money to be able to run shows because Dixie had got it in such a financial crisis that Bound for Glory might not have happened if Billy Corgan didn't put the money for production costs for talent to be able to get there. So he went in and he threw a lot of money there, and he made the product really better. Like Drew McIntyre said on Talk Is Jericho that if Billy Corgan had successfully bought TNA, then the Hardys and Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway, would have still been in TNA. They would have
imagine the landscape would have
renewed their contracts, and they would have been able to discuss terms with WWE. And because Billy Corgan brought fresh approach, like new ideas, like he gave him the access to do the Broken Universe for Matt and Jeff Hardy.
So Corgan is a wrestling fan then?
Yes, and that is the big thing. Corgan is first and foremost a wrestling fan, and he has outrightly said many a times, and that's why he's pursued this.
Whereas Dixie
was poached by Jeff Jarrett to as like
she liked wrestling, but she just had a lot of money and would say yes or no to whatever. Like
yeah, Jeff was always in the driving seat, and she was the checkbook.
I think she grew to like wrestling.
Yeah.
I think she got into wrestling.
No, but with her becoming like more and more of an on-screen presence, it shows that she realised that she had to become an integral part, almost in a way of mimicking the Vince McMahon thing and the Vince Russo thing years previous. But that's all said and done now.
Well, so it's big news to bring back the NWA.
Yeah, so he's purchased NWA, and with that, I think he got their. I'm not sure if he got their video library, but he got the rights to the name. He got their title belts as well, which is a big thing, like the NWA World Title. And what he's wanting to do, he isn't wanting to just throw money at it. He wants to be part of the revolution of wrestling, and he wants it to become a powerhouse. Like I said, not just throw money at it. He's got a 20-year plan in mind to make it like a big thing in wrestling once again. Because it's died down with the territories, and he's wanting to revamp that. And
this is an interesting thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Callum. It's an interesting thing about NWA. Before Ted Turner kind of made his stake in wrestling be known and create what we now know as WCW, it was originally NWA, and it was Ted Turner's connections, his money, his the fact that he ran a lot of TV, that he was able to make what was seen as a more traditional wrestling, that was focused on more on the athleticism and the physicality of wrestling as a sport, as opposed to sports entertainment that WWF at the time was. So there was a lot of prestige to the NWA titles. There's a reason why so many people have had NWA titles. Ric Flair, the reason why he's such a multi-time world champion. Sting, Lex Luger, Randy Savage, Hulk
all
Hogan.
the TNA champions for about
for
4
the
years.
first 4 years,
Yeah.
I believe it was. Yeah, and that's another thing as well. The NWA has continued despite WCW failing, because it was a broad organisation, and what a lot of people don't realise is that when young wrestling promotions were starting out, they would apply to the NWA to basically lease their titles as holdouts until they were able to build up enough money to then create their own. So that's the reason why in the early days TNA was seen as an offshoot of the NWA.
NWA TNA.
Exactly. So a lot of the early champions, the world champions in TNA, were using the NWA championship. When Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe were feuding, they had the NWA title, because that is the kind of the position that they were in. Jeff Jarrett was able to kind of bend and twist the arm of NWA in order to use a lot of their championships, because they had TV tapings, they had exposure, so it was multi-beneficial.
At that time, NWA was kind of it's been worse off now, where it's kind of a dead promotion. I know they've got some affiliated companies, but it isn't a juggernaut of
It's not a juggernaut.
Is this going to be, despite the coverage it's got so far, is this going to be to American wrestling what the World of Sport revival was to British
I
wrestling?
think it could be, but with more success.
With actual success.
Yeah. I think a lot of people was excited to see World of Sport back, and when it came back, it was very different to what some people wanted. Whereas, a bit like what James was saying regarding the tradition and the values of it, Like, that's something he's expressed as well in this interview. He wants it where fans that aren't familiar with NWA will respect the tradition of it. And and what they're trying to accomplish is a bit like what Ring of Honor and New Japan have, where everyone respects the tradition of those companies and respects what they stand for. And he tried working something out with Anthem, and he was hoping they could work together so they was both getting something from it, which makes sense, but that didn't happen. Corgan stated that they'd made an aggressive offer to Anthem last month to go in, help reboot Impact Wrestling since GFW's no longer part of it. So help Impact stay in their lane. I don't know what that, like, be more traditional. I don't know what that'd mean. What is their lane now? Is it still great wrestling but with the sports entertainment side of it? I'm not too sure, but he wanted to set NWA as a natural rival, and for Impact and NWA to be what Raw and SmackDown are.
Oh yeah,
And
that's interesting. But
that didn't pay off. Like, Anthem didn't go with it, but I think it. Like,
I think Corgan's got the better idea doing it on his own about approaching Impact. If
Yeah.
he's got a 20-year plan, I don't think you can put TNA into a 1-year plan.
hey,
I know we always say,
The littlest wrestling promotion,
The
like the scrappy.
yeah, like
Yeah.
we always say after the apocalypse happens, cockroaches and TNA will still be around. But realistically, speaking of dead promotions, I just.
The problem with a 20-year plan is the landscape can change a lot in 20 years. To look at other 20-year plans, Bret Hart was signed to a 20-year contract. Look what happened there.
I think he'll have contingencies, and he's a smart enough man to change to the times, which that's what he did with Impact. He went in and knew that he needed to change, and the ratings were going up and up and up whilst he was at the helm. So I think it'll be interesting to see where they'll go, if they can establish, like, what sort of roster they're going to establish. Like, I'm not too. NWA was a bit before, like, my time, so I'm not too familiar with how it's run, because I know there's a lot of affiliations in America of, like, is it NWA Smoky Mountain?
NWA in the UK, there was NWA affiliates as well, including Hammerlock.
Wasn't one
Hammerlock.
Fight Nation, because Marty Scale held the NWA British title or something like that, and it was.
He was trained with the infamous Hammerlock.
I'm pretty sure Sheamus and Finn Balor went through Hammerlock.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many of the big names. Alex Shane,
Nick
obviously.
Aldis did some stuff.
Yeah.
I know he came from Norfolk with the Knights. But
Talking about all change, though, we're on to our second topic. I've decided now the Defiant WCPW are becoming Defiant.
Well done.
That thrilling. I was impressed with that.
Nice.
Yes. So as we all know, there have been recent changes in WCPW talent and behind the scenes workers as well, with a lot of them going away. And WCPW, the guy who runs the company, has decided that he wants to distance the wrestling promotion from What Culture itself, because he feels that some people don't like What Culture or like What Culture too much when Adam, Jack, and
the
Adam,
Jack,
and the rest of them were involved, and that their departure may sour them to WCPW. So they've decided to change the name of the company to Defiant Wrestling, not to be confused with Dominant Wrestling, which were 5-star.
or whilst you're talking about confusion, there's also Defy Wrestling.
Defy, yes.
I think they're based in New York.
Yeah, well, I mean, Defy Wrestling are a small wrestling company. They're so small I hadn't heard of them until Defiant
They've been
Wrestling
around for
became a thing.
Yeah, they've been around for like 10 months. They seem to have quite hot cards for independent wrestling, but yeah, they've been making some noise. They call their fan base Defiance, but with a Y.
Very much like Judgment Day. The Americans can't spell there, but we'll let them off with that.
So I'm guessing they asked WCPW to reconsider naming their company Defiant Wrestling, and I'm guessing they declined. So they tweeted about it, saying WCPW should be ashamed of themselves because Defiant Wrestling and Defy Wrestling are too similar.
Very much like, you'll all remember the controversy between WCPW and other similarly named companies. Coventry Pro Wrestling CPW were livid that WCPW had used 3 of their letters. Preston City Wrestling, it's an anagram. The CPW, PCW, it's an anagram. I don't know if you read the cease and desist letter from WWE, because they own the rights to WCW, and there's a W and a C and a W, and then oh no, none of that happened because the rest of the world are grown up.
But I don't get it. Like, the 2 different fan bases
In 2 different
continents.
continents.
Exactly. And I just think it's Defy being quite petty, and like, no disrespect to Defy, because I've not seen their products, but if you're putting out the better product, then why would you get mixed up with Defiant Wrestling? Because you would be the ones that take centre stage.
This
Like,
was
part of
like...
their product, people are gonna know who you are.
and this is a younger company as well that are trying to snap at what culture that has existed for many years, and WCPW that has been on the run now for touching 2 years.
Just over one year.
But,
Just over a year.
but with incredible social media reach, incredible YouTube reach.
Yeah, millions of subscribers to
yeah,
their What Culture
yeah.
base.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't go to WCPW/Defiant Wrestling thinking it's something else. I remember
What are
friend.
you going to do? Get on the plane to England and think you're going to watch Defy
Yeah,
Wrestling?
yeah, that's it.
I remember my friend who's
There's
much
nothing on
older
their
than,
social media.
I remember my friend who's much older than me being absolutely stunned at the idea that anybody would ever mistake WWF for the World Wildlife Federation. But this is how Defy are taking this on. And
So it's Defy with DEFY.
yeah.
How can that get confused with Defiant?
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the roots of
That's
the
like
words are the
high.
same.
That's like
Yeah.
high wrestling getting confused with hello wrestling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
The worst name for a company ever, that would be.
Oh, yeah, I know,
Imagine.
but-
I know, I'm just saying. imagine.
High wrestling. But it's, I don't know.
It would
James and Jamie, like, we can tell them apart.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
of you has to go. I'm sorry.
Well, Bell's not here, so I win.
You're in.
an earlier.
Someone want to wish Bell and his best in his future endeavours?
Yeah,
Send him a cease and
Jimmy,
desist on his
we're
name.
Yeah.
future endeavouring you. You've heard it here first. You're not welcome back. You can probably go work for another podcast.
The Ultra-Violent Rest Hold?
One of the very good podcasts that do.
What about
kind
that
of
grapple
coverage.
guys?
Grap Hull Guys was going to be one of the names for this podcast because these guys are into grappling. They're all from Hull. Grap Hull Guys.
But yeah, so going back to WCPW,
Gra-
when they made the changes, everyone was like, oh, like, we're not going to go again. Like, the Adams have gone, it's going to be crap. But they just had Refuse to Lose, which was, I think, sold out. It was packed. So was a load of tapings in Manchester.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is like all the WWE network subscribers who go, oh, we don't like the way this is booked, we're going to cancel our subscriptions, that'll teach them. Oh, no, it's Hell in a Cell this weekend, I better sign up again.
Yep, definitely. So, like, there was news that Stu Bennett was the new general manager of Defiant
That's
Wrestling.
bad news for you. I've
Yeah.
got bad news
Well,
for ya.
funny you should say that. He opened Refuse to Lose, which was the last pay-per-view under the WCPW banner that aired this past Monday, which is quite fitting because Refuse to Lose 2016 was the first pay-per-view from What Culture Pro Wrestling. And so he's doing a promo, and all you hear is a fan say, give us some bad news. So he goes, well, funny you should say that. I've just been speaking to the Young Bucks backstage, and with their predicament, I think I'm going to stay away from the bad news. So he acknowledged the cease and desist, and the card was like it was a really good card. With so two of the highlights was War Machine, who are the WCPW Tag Team Champions, facing the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks had lost their luggage or something, so they had to, and I'll quote them, wrestle in their dad jeans.
Love it.
The match got made into a War Machine's rule match, so like no count outs, no disqualifications, and it was great. Like the War Machines do like the arm clink, what Sheamus and Cesaro do. So they like give us an arm clink to the Young Bucks, and as they go to do it, they go too sweet, me bro, knowing full well that the Young Bucks can't throw it up, and then throughout it, Hansen was like doing suck hits, knowing that they can do it, but the Young Bucks can't.
Yeah.
I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. The match was great, and then it was capped off with the world title in the main event between Joe Hendry and Will Ospreay. Marty Scurll earlier in the night won the Magnificent Seven briefcase off El Ligero, cashes in, a bit similar to Seth Rollins, both men down, he runs out, he cashes in, doesn't get the win straight away, turns into a triple threat, and now Marty Scurll, the villain, is going to be leading the era of Defiant Wrestling as champion.
Brilliant.
Wow.
And talking about both Will Ospreay and the Hardy Boys, not the Hardy Boys, the Young Bucks, who are different tag teams, that leads us into our final 3 count, where we will cease and desist. Oh no, we're not cease and desisting, they're ceasing and desisting. For those who aren't aware, the Young Bucks have been issued a cease and desist for the Too Sweet little fingers thing. And Will Ospreay has allegedly been issued a cease and desist for the
Port is Raw.
Port is War and Kitty style t-shirts. A cease and desist is often used to tell people to stop doing something and don't start doing it later. Often used for trademark infringement. Sometimes used for other things as well, but in this case it is trademark infringement. The strange thing about this, of course, is that this isn't the first time that wrestlers have mimicked trademarks. You can see it on many t-shirts. The designs of them often mimic big brands, but this is one of the first times recently, especially in British wrestling, that WWE has issued these.
Yeah, I think it's because it got prompted by Bullet Club invading Raw, doing the thing outside the arena.
This is
X-Pac mentioned on his podcast that Vince McMahon he wasn't amused at all. That pissed him off.
What's the difference between Young Bucks invading Raw
And
and DX invading
WCW.
It's happening towards Vince McMahon, so he doesn't like it.
Yeah, of
right.
course.
What's the difference though?
Oh, there's no difference.
No.
It's just because it's
No.
happening to Vince.
Yeah.
So I think
So
it's
is
just.
it a big tit for tat?
It's like if you're going to do that, then we're going to stop you from getting over with
No,
our
but that's
trademarks.
that's McMahon in a nutshell, though. Instead of just ignoring it and knowing that it'll go away eventually, the fad will just fade away. Well, it's not a fad, but it's just like but what he's done is
Because he
it's the
can't
Streisand.
sign him.
It's the Streisand effect. It's he is indirectly acknowledging something so that people are looking at it. So it's like, oh well, you've put the cease and desist there, and he's like, no, I don't want people to think about it, to talk about it. They're not doing it anymore. But then suddenly they're bringing out new merch. They are bringing attention to it, and so people are talking about it like us. It's all indirect exposure. When if he'd have just left it, no one would care.
But I think the
Apart from him sadly grumbling, but he did the same thing during the 90s when he had the what was it? It was the War Room skit where he had Hulk Hogan and Savage and they were taking the piss.
Yes, the
And-
no
and
show
it-
man.
It was garbage, and it's like, why acknowledge a
Yeah.
competition if you just leave it and get on with your own thing?
Yeah.
People will just
But
forget about it.
It's one of those. If they are coming to their shows, then that's going to give Young Bucks exposure anyways to the casual fans. Like, oh, who are these guys making a racket? Then go home and tweet them. So if somebody was doing that, to me, I'd be the dick and be like, you know what? We're on the trademark to Too Sweet. We also do it with Suck It. You aren't using that anymore. And I think they've kind of looked at the Ring of Honor New Japan guys, hence why Will Ospreay's got one and thought, right, whoever works for those companies, if you do anything that's slightly like a parody of what we've got, we're going to cease and desist you.
One of the things with it as well, of course, is that it's a very, very underhand way of reminding wrestlers who's in charge. Because with the best one in the world, Will Ospreay will be WWE bound at somewhere in the future. He's not, by any stretch of the imagination, old for a British wrestler. He is doing gangbusters over in New Japan. His appearances in America, anywhere in the world, anywhere he goes, he seems to have the Midas touch. If he wants to end up in WWE, he's not going to say on this topic. He's not going to say, "I'm ignoring WWE cease and desist. I'm going to show them." He has no choice.
He did say on Twitter, he said, "I'm completely in the wrong.
Yeah.
I've removed all the t-shirts.
Yeah.
Don't be angry at WWE. This is my fault."
Yeah.
And you can tell he's saving face because he knows, like he said,
Absolutely.
one day he'll be in WWE.
Yeah.
And if you do look at the t-shirts Ospreay had out, they were exact replicas of WWE t-shirts. So I can see why they do it.
And that's the thing as well. It's like towing a line, because there's been numerous occasions where this kind of thing has happened and people have let it slide, like the BWO. They were in multiple different wrestling organisations, and they're a clear parody of the NWO.
That wasn't taken serious. That was like
but it's still
it's Gilbert and Goldberg.
Yeah, that's
but
it.
You see t-shirt designs based on, like the Nike swoosh, Jack Daniels, that type of thing, and it does make me think.
So the Dean Ambrose shirt.
Could this be a land grab? Could this be the start of almost like a land grab of these companies? Because I mean, I look back at things like there were lots of wrestling fans saying that Madonna should have let Grado use Like a Prayer. Now, Madonna may not have known that Grado used Like a Prayer, but she would have been perfectly within her rights as a musician to say, "Hold on, you've been using my music for how long without my permission?"
Yeah, intellectual property. But that's a much more feasible thing. Like with the merch, it's a much more feasible thing. A gesture seems so far beyond any kind of quantifiable logic, because you can't make money.
How much
arguably,
do you per use?
They had that on Too Sweet all over shirts.
And that's where there's a clear separation.
Right.
With Madonna, it is you have to buy a CD, you have to have a physical copy to play the music, or a digital download. You have to have her intellectual property. But that's the basis there. It's the same thing with just the gesture alone. Fair enough.
But spitting it on something.
Yeah, that's like I'm going to send you a cease and desist so you can never say my name.
Yeah. I imagine it would be the same, because obviously you're in the band Davidium.
I am.
And if I suddenly started putting you say you release a CD, you go to the extent of getting a fantastic cover made and all the rest of it, and you give it a fantastic name, and I suddenly start putting that on my t-shirts and selling them down the market for 20 quid a pop, you're probably going to go, "Hold on."
Because that's
I get what you're saying there.
And that's a thing that I feel like needs to be cleared up, and that's obviously something that Will Ospreay has addressed, and he's made very clear. I was using your designs. I was in the wrong. Fair enough. I won't do it again. Hand gestures and stuff. The Young Bucks, because of how they knew that they were inciting a response, made merch that directly like pointed the finger at it, and obviously they're not allowed to keep doing it anymore. But now that it just leads to this thing again with the Streisand effect. They're just bringing more and more attention to the Young Bucks and all the people that and that's the thing as well. You can understand as well with the Fed. They've looked at the Young Bucks and went, "Don't like them doing that. We've got to make an example of them." But then is anyone else doing it? And then Ospreay, obviously been on their radar, like what we said before about Regal and Triple H knowing of everybody. He's a hot commodity. Of course, people are going to realise, and it's like
collateral damage.
that's it.
I don't blame him whatsoever. But
No.
taking it back to the Grado thing, though, I think Madonna, if he ever gets to WWE, I imagine all I picture is WrestleMania, Madonna singing Like a Prayer to Grado coming out. That would be amazing.
It would be, but that would never happen because on previous tapings, like everybody remembers, Sandman used to come out to Enter Sandman in ECW. The network could not be bothered to pay the royalty fee to have that in the one night stand pay-per-view.
Yeah, but if Grado became such a sensation as he has in the UK but in WWE,
but you could argue that Sandman is a more well-known and hotter commodity than Grado,
I
and that's
think-
not.
I
And
disagree.
that's not.
I
that's
think that is a topic for a different time. I think what we'll do is apparently we won't wind up the podcast here. Kurt wants to have a last word.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna throw it out there before we close, like about Pro Wrestling Tees.
Oh yes.
They are now opening their own retail store. So it's going to be based in Chicago, Illinois. They're going to be doing a grand opening on Friday the 30th of October, which they'll have special guest appearances to be announced.
It looks amazing
Yeah.
inside.
That sounds awesome.
DJ Z's going to be there doing a live DJ set both Friday and Saturday. On Saturday the October 14th, they will have ACH, Sammy Callahan, Jeff Cobb, Michael Elgin and Brian Cage. Sunday, October 15th, they'll have another opening special.
Get this as well, you can go into the store and you can choose a t-shirt that you want, and if they don't have it in stock, they'll make it for you there and then, and you can leave with the t-shirt.
That is fantastic.
They'll stitch the t-shirt for you.
You can get it printed there and then and leave with it within the hour.
Yeah,
that is absolutely
amazing.
fantastic.
Absolutely
And
fantastic.
then Monday, October 16th, Bullet Club will be there doing a meet and greet between 10 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. So Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, Kenny Omega, Marty Scale and Cody Rhodes will be there.
Amazing.
That one is a ticketed event.
That's
Of course
a dream,
it is.
isn't it? Having that kind of wrestling store in the UK would be amazing.
Well, having that
Yeah.
kind of, like status.
Come on,
with
Merch Britannia, it's time to step up your game.
So,
Patson knows as well.
Congrats to Pro Wrestling Tees.
yeah, well done.
That
Very
is also the only place you can get the Chicago Bullet Club t-shirt as well.
Makes sense.
You can't order it online, you have to go to the store. So
Of course.
again, congrats to Pro Wrestling Tees. We wish you the best here at 1-4 Pod.
Okay, we will wrap up the show for this week.
We need to plug social.
We'll plug social as we go along.
And our new website.
Yes.
And our new website.
Okay, I'm going to plug some social media now. You can follow us on Twitter, like I have, at OneFallPod. You can find us on Instagram, also at OneFallPod. You can find Kurt Johansson on Snapchat as OneFallProd, but that's especially for the ladies there. I genuinely hope there's somebody called OneFallProd and they're just going to get loads of boob pics now. Yeah, he's going to what? Why are all these women sending me boobs?
Let's make that Snapchat account.
Yes. I've been your host for this
We
week.
haven't finished the social
Apparently
plugs.
I haven't finished the social post. We've got a website.
Right, so
We've
Dave,
got a
let me do
website.
the social.
Yes,
All
Dave,
right, apparently I can't do the social
No, because you
plugs.
try to end the show every time you do it.
Well, I want to go home.
Twitter at OneFallPod.
Twitter at OneFallPod.
Facebook at
At
OneFallPod.
OneFallPod.
Kate Johansson 93.
On Twitter.
James Roman Oyster
on Twitter, Instagram.
Dave,
you can find me, because this is the
At
only
Dynamic
important one,
Thinking.
at Dynamic Thinking on practically all of social media. I'm also a cult variable on gamey things like
come on.
that's it.
Right,
Yeah.
and you can find me at Palace of Wisdom on Twitter, and check out our new website onefallpodcast.co.uk. And if you're interested in writing for us, any reviews or articles, email us at write@onefallpodcast.co.uk.
Right at onefallpodcast.co.uk. Thanks for listening, boy and girl. We will see you all again in the future. Well, it's actually next week, which is in the future. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.